on those phones and jam the phone lines, okay? They don't know where those calls are coming from. All they know is there's 285 million calls on hold, and they're registered voters, and it really helps out. We have a situation in the state of Montana where in their barbering legislation, we had a board member actually on social media trying to beg barbers to show up to this event so that they could defend their licensing. And if you've ever been to Montana, you understand it's 70-mile-an-hour dirt roads for a long ways to get somewhere sometimes. And so they had a really difficult time getting barbers to show up. So cosmetologists showed up for them and got that put away. So another state, the barbers showed up for the cosmetologists and got that put away. So it's really important that we all, the more we unite, the better off we are. And what I'm really excited about was we heard a lot about barbering at this last region meeting and how the industry is changing and how it's evolving and how it's growing. We're getting barber schools open all over the country, and that is exciting to me because this industry is definitely completely reconfigured itself. And the barbers we're seeing now are artistic barbers. They're doing designs in the scalp. They're doing, they dress different. They look different. They're a whole different arm of the barbering. And we love that, because it's reinventing that career field again and rejuvenating it. So, we see a lot of barber schools open up around the country, 3 and 4 in most states, which is nice. So programs are opening up. We talked a lot about that, but at the same time, we have to keep our regulation in check. And we have to make sure that that licensure stays where it is. And actually, in some cases, our own industry is fighting against this because a lot of these big commercial companies are not able to find people to work for them. And so they're actually part of our deregulation problem because they want it deregulated so they can train their own. So we have to watch out for that too, whether our own industry is not attacking us as well. So that's one thing we talked about. We also talked about an organization called Cut It Out. It's an organization that deals with abuse. And I sat and I listened to it and I thought in my career, if I'd had this training a long time ago, I probably could have really helped some of my friends because my clients are my friends. Some of them I've worked with for several years. Some of them I'm burying now and working on their grandchildren. So it's interesting to see how we have these lifetime friends in our careers. But I probably could have helped some of those people. And they did bring up barbering in there. It was interesting to me to find out that 25% of the abuse that goes on in this country is among men. And not only that, a lot of women are now going to barbers. So we're dealing with all kinds of people in our careers now, not just specific people as we have in the past. So it's important to know, I think, how to work with that. But that's a great organization to get involved in as far as information and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that NIC talks about. We don't really necessarily talk about examinations. We talk about regulations. We talk about things going on in the industry. So every single state board, every single barber board, cosmetology board in the country belongs to NIC, whether they use the examination or not. So they come in and then we talk about it. The examination is totally separate. It's actually designed under the National Examination Committee, which is an NIC affiliate. And that's who takes care of this examination and writes it and maintains it and so forth. So when we say NIC, we're actually talking about the big picture, not the little one. But this is the website I was telling you about. This is Tamara Sheely. She's from Georgia. She's actually running for the Senate in Georgia. She is a Spitfire, and she's working very, very diligently in our industry. I actually listened to a couple radio shows she did here in California on regulation of barbers, which were interesting. But you can go on her on this website and listen to what she has to say about it. But the key thing about this website is it's got all 50 states on it. You can click on them and see where the deregulation bills are moving and where the movement is happening. I would really pay a lot of attention to Tennessee, Arizona, and Montana this year. Put them in your scope because I know there's some problems there. But that is a great organization. I'm not saying to join it. I'm just saying you can go on her website and click on those states and see where things are happening. If you feel like you want to join it, that's totally up to you. But the mission of the NIC Council is to promote health, safety, and welfare. And this is where the examination gets really confusing. And we get a lot of people call in sometimes and say, I've been a barber for 50 years and I can't pass this examination. Reason being, the examination is based on health and safety. And health and safety has changed a lot over the years, and we're going to talk about that and talk about some ways that you can educate your students when they come to be candidates, they can understand what health and safety really is. and be successful in their pursuit. But the scope of the National Practical Examination, of course, has core services. Core services means every single state in the union, if they use the NIC barber exam, they take those same sections. We have to remember now, examinations have changed. We no longer examine services, we examine sections, and we examine safety and infection control. So in a shave now, we don't examine, and you'll see the new shave happen, we don't examine a shave. That's not what we're looking at. We're not looking at a soft skill of shaving. We're looking at safe use of a razor, the ability to apply a chemical to the face. We're looking at using razors and combs and clippers and things safely. So we're doing a basic service, but we're also examining health and safety. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But everybody says, where do you get your information for the barber exam? We get it from you. And we take the surveys actually right on the NIC website right now. The aesthetics is being updated. So if you want an example of it, that's where you can go look. But we actually do a survey. They click on that. They go through. They tell us what's important in barbering to examine on. And we take that information. We put it in front of a panel of subject matter experts from around the country. And those subject matter experts worked very well together on this barber exam. And they designed a very, very well-tuned barber exam, I believe. They were very sophisticated barbers and understanding. And one of the problems we have in barbering is it's a lot of tradition. And tradition is very hard to defend. And tradition is very hard to endorse when health and safety is the key. And so these barbers worked very well together. They had to put down their egos and their traditions for a minute and say, okay, what's really important here? And I think they really got a great scope of what that was about. So they take that information, they don't change it, they take it to the panel of subject matter experts, and those experts go in and say, okay, how are we going to do this? Are we going to look at this in a practical sense, or are we going to look at this in a written sense, or can we do it in both? And then the examinations are written based on the information that we've got back from that survey. So it's interesting to see how all this is created. But we do offer it a standard, legally defensible program. When I say standard, I actually will be here again in September. We'd like to invite each one of you. There'll be open houses, so stay tuned. When you get your letters from the Barber Cause, they'll tell you where those open houses are, and we'll be there to answer your questions and talk a little bit more about some things that I'll bring up later. But it'll be a great learning program for you. It'll be an opportunity for you to come in and talk to us, basically one-on-one, see the sites, and you know, kind of get familiar with what's going on. But the standardization of this means that we come here every single year and we train your examiners. Not only do we talk to you and do an overview, we spend 2 days training your examiners on these examinations. We want this examination to be given in California exactly like it's given in Alabama or Tennessee or in South Carolina, North Carolina, South Dakota. It's got to be exactly the same. And that's what we mean by standardized. So the testing experience that you're experiencing here in California is the same one they're getting everywhere else, just so you understand that. But as far as our development goes, and this is really the only part I cover on the written, but as far as the development goes, we take that survey, like I said, we get that information, and then we go through a development process we call the validity chain. And in the written examination, a question is written by a subject matter expert, then it's reviewed by a panel of subject matter experts until it's conceived as being a good question. That question is then put on a test form. And so as your students come in to take their examinations, they'll have 10 pretest questions that are 0 weighted. And we're just simply seeing how those questions perform. And we take that back to the psychometricians, and the psychometricians look at them. These are people who crunch numbers and see exactly what's happening with that question. If everybody's getting it right, maybe there's a better thing we need to examine on. But if everybody's getting it wrong, we need to really look at that and see what's wrong with that question, what's wrong with that information. NIC also reviews all the barber content to make sure none of the barber content conflicts the question. So one candidate base would learn something is correct and one candidate base learns it doesn't matter. We wouldn't actually test on that because it would be unfair to one set of the candidates. So these questions are very well beaten up, very well written, very well reviewed. They're actually written exactly like an SAT question. So I think it's important that you know that. We don't write tricky questions. I had a candidate who got a hold of my email address actually from California the other day who emailed me and said, you know, I don't like your examination, it's tricky. She said, I had a question about bones, and every single one of the answers on the question was a bone. And I said, exactly. You know, if it's about a bone, we're going to ask you which bone it is. We're going to give bones as the distractors and bone as the key, which we don't make up names, we don't make up terms, we don't do any of that stuff. It's all actual. We don't try to trick anybody. They're all multiple choice questions, okay, just so you know in the written. But in the practical itself, in the development, we go through, we make sure we go through run-throughs, we bring in people who actually take the examination in front, and talk about nerve-wracking, but in front of the subject matter experts who are new in the field, and they perform these tasks so we can see if these examinations are actually functioning, if they're actually testing something and so forth. So there's a lot of thought and process that goes into this. There's a lot of psychometrics and so forth. So it is all part of this validity chain. So by the time that examination comes to you, it's a valid, legally defensible examination. But we do believe in a solid commitment to maintain high standards that are established in our industry and by our barbers. We believe that in most examination formats, a candidate could possibly look at a CIB. And if you think about the old formats, you could look and see, we'll look at the barbers currently. It says the way you use a steam towel. Right in the task line, it tells you need to wring it, you need to test the temperature, and so forth. It tells you exactly how to use a steam towel. So a senator, basically, with any practical knowledge, could probably pass that examination just by reading those task lines if you really look at it. And so we've gone to a competency-based exam where we don't tell you how to use a steam towel. We expect you to come to the examination knowing how to use it. So we'll say apply a steam towel. That means wring it, test the temperature, apply it to the face. So it's written out a little bit differently because that didn't work in the whole format of deregulation. When we get in that arena and a senator can pass an examination without any training, what is the use of your school? So we want to make sure they're competent when they come. I understand right now as they come to the examinations, they're not wringing steam towels. So make sure that we understand that that's part of the evaluation, even though it's not in the task line anymore, okay? The other thing that doesn't appear in these new task lines is currently you'll see in each section it says follows infection control procedures, maintains safe work area. You have 2 task lines for that. In the new format or the updated format, you won't see those task lines. And the reason being is because when these are created, these examinations are created, you get all the information on that CIB. You get the verbal instructions and you get the task lines. What you don't see is underneath each one of those task lines are no statements. And they're the only way a candidate can fail that task. So that's what the subject matter experts do. They go in and they write these no statements. They research them in the books. They make sure they don't conflict. And that's what your candidates are examined on. So it's no longer the examiner that makes that judgment call. It's the task line. And so as your candidates come in, they all have the same criteria. They're all scored exactly the same. And it's a very, very fair examination at that point. But we have gone to the competency base. We want to see a basic skill. We want to see how you teach them. So you'll see the shave. No longer does it matter if they do a 31-stroke shave or a 15-stroke shave. It matters that they use a razor and they use it correctly. They use it in the right place because we have to see placement in the right areas to see proper use of the razor. So you'll kind of see how this is structured a little bit differently as far as the examination goes. But remember, these are sections. These are not services. So when we score the haircut's over, we go to the next section. We score the shave. When the shave's over, we go to the next section. We never go back and score something off that happened before, and we never carry something forward that happened in the past. It's a brand new day in Section 1. It's a brand new day in Section 2, okay, and so forth. We do promote national endorsement and regulations affecting the practice of barbering, cosmetology, and its related fields, and I think that's important to know because if you look at the nursing industry, they don't have a whole lot of problem with deregulation. And the reason being is because they're all together. They take the same examination, they take the same amount of hours, everything is standard, they leave them alone. What they see in our industry is if you move from California to South Carolina and you never took an NIC examination, South Carolina is going to make you take one. you will take an NIC examination in South Carolina. And so they see that as a barrier. That's how the Congress looks at it, as a barrier. So we're trying to get this all together so that we have one examination, we have everything going in the right direction, and people can just move around, and we're definitely on board with that, making sure that we can get rid of this deregulation by all coming together on it. It's the responsibility of NIC and the state of California to ensure that nobody's going to hurt anybody while they're practicing barbering or electrology or cosmetology or nail technician. It's important that we understand that we're putting out people. When you send us a student, they come in as a candidate. We hope they leave as a licensed professional, because that's what this examination does, correct? They come in as an entry level, they leave as a professional, the same level as all of us are. They have a license. And it doesn't matter, if you look at the medical profession, it doesn't matter what they passed with. It matters that it says doctor behind their name, or doctor in front of their name. And that's the same with barbering and cosmetology. We're not so concerned with the score as we are that they passed the examination. But we only evaluate the tasks that you have in that candidate information bulletin. Those are available on your website. I would definitely go straight to your California website to get those candidate information bulletins, because they have all the information for California. If you choose to go to the NIC website, you're going to be struggling through it trying to figure out what California does. So it's just much easier just to go straight to your website and get that information off your website. And as you watch these videos, make sure you download a fresh copy. When you go to the DCA website, you can have your students watch this presentation as well. It just helps them to understand. But you can visit that website to obtain the CIB specific to California. Like I said, the NIC webpage just has general information on testing, so you're better off going to your own. But like I said, download a fresh copy for each student as they go through these programs, and you teach them about this examination. That will help them understand the tasks. And they perform the tasks the way you teach them, not the way we tell you to do them. That's the other thing that's happening, is we no longer say you have to perform a haircut the way we tell you to. The state board haircut is gone. They now do the haircut that you teach them according to the perimeters that we give you, and the examiners score them accordingly. So it's awesome. It really is. You'll love the haircut. But you can also visit the NIC webpage to take a practice written examination. Those written examinations are $30. They take it one time. It gives them justification on why questions are right and wrong. It's not the NIC test, so don't get me wrong there. It's a practice test. It teaches them how to work with our questions. It teaches them how that examination is going to go. Maybe take a little bit of the edge off when they get there for the written. So our examinations are given in a testing environment. That's important to understand, because your candidates are evaluated at all times. Even though they've completed a section and they step back, they're still being scored for health and safety. So it's a good idea to sanitize when I walk up, and it's a good idea to sanitize when I step away. All right? Because my hands I have to remember who these hands belong to as I'm working. If I've touched my client or my mannequin, my hands now belong to them. I can't scratch my head. I can't contaminate my drawer or my kit. I have to sanitize before I do those things, and then sanitize when I go back to those other things. And we'll talk about that when we get into the exam itself. But they are evaluated at all times. They must follow our appropriate public protection and infection control procedures during all phases of this examination. That's very, very important. Cell phones have to go away, and we're still seeing a lot of cell phones. It's kind of interesting to me when I came to California and they come to their break and they excuse candidates from the room for their break, and the first thing they do is go get stuff out of their kit, and they pull their cell phone out of their kit. They'll be immediately dismissed if there's a cell phone inside that room at all. The examination staff cannot tell you what to do with a cell phone if you have it there. They can't tell you, I'll hold it for you. They can't tell you, I'll watch that for you. They can't tell you to take it to your car. They just tell you it can't come in there. So make sure they're not even bringing them to the test site. I know that's very difficult. Some of them have to call for rides, and they can all justify why they need a cell phone. They can't bring them in the room. That's the bottom line. So make sure they're not bringing those. They also can't wear watches or exercise bands, anything electronic they cannot wear unless it sustains life. If they need an insulin pump, they're definitely welcome to wear that. Or a pacemaker is fine as well. But any other type of item that they really don't need, don't bring it. It's just a good idea. They also can't have any print or handwritten material. And I'm going to give you some examples of what I've seen here, how these kits are packed and so forth that might cause you to have some problems. Like I said, the examinations change, the way you pack your kit's going to change. So we're going to talk about that. And in those open houses, I'm going to show you how to pack kits so that you'll be able to look at a kit and see if it's functional or not, or pack your own as a school. But we can't have a copy of the CIB inside the kit. We can't have laundry lists written on the front of a bag of everything that's inside that bag. This is a competency examination. I want to see a bag that says Client 1. Client 1 would be my haircutting section. Okay? So they just dump this bag out. They have all their haircutting clippers, whatever supplies inside that. They sort it out, and they know how to use everything on the table. That's competency. So it's faced a little bit differently. My Client 2 bag, of course, would contain my shaving supplies for my Client 2. So that's how I would start thinking. It's competency now. I should be able to dump Client 2 bag out. I should be able to sort that out on my table and figure out the shape. In the chemical section, I should be able to dump out all those things on the table, and we'll talk about that. And I should be able to sort it out and use them and know when to use protective cream and when not to. All those sort of things. So things have changed, and we're going to talk about how that works. But they can't have any laundry lists of things, and they also can't say, this was one of my favorite, and this comes from aesthetics, but we also see it in a lot of different ones. But this bottle says massage. Well, if I could invent massage in a bottle, I would be not standing here in front of you. I'd be in the Bahamas somewhere. This is actually massage cream or massage lotion or massage oil, correct? That's what's inside this bottle, not massage. So, we see monomer bottles marked nail liquid. Well, that doesn't tell us that it's monomer, and that needs a factory label. So there's some different things that we're going to talk about as we go through these that will kind of spur you and key you into how these kits should work and how these candidates are performing. But they can't talk to each other and they can't bother. Make sure they're not thinking borrow shaving cream or pass things back and forth because they can't. Once they're inside that room, they have to use exactly what they brought. And if they don't have it, they can simulate it with something else and hope that works for them well. Some of the things we don't bring to this examination are fumigants, wet disinfectant jars, or aerosols. That's very important to understand. If they do bring those wet disinfectant jars, they will be taken away. If their tools are in them, they're taken away with their tools in them. So make sure they don't bring them. We don't evaluate them. This is a national examination in California. Maybe you can put that on your station, but in most states now you can't even put these on your stations. They're in a back room somewhere. So that's why we evaluate things the way we do. Fumigants, of course, a lot of states have outlawed those. We don't bring those in there. We don't need them. We're not evaluating that at all. And aerosols, absolutely none. So shaving cream has to come in a paste form or a gel form, nothing that's dispersed by gas or air. We don't need to talk about this slide. But all containers and products are considered multi-use. And this is very important for you to understand. Everything that I set on my station is the same thing that I would sit on my station in real life. So when I put my shaving cream out there, because we're shaving the neck in the haircut, I'm going to use that same shaving cream container on my second client for the shave. That just makes sense, doesn't it? Every client that comes in, I don't bring out new shaving cream. I'm just going to wipe it down with disinfectant, move it over during my client change, and reuse that again. Protective cream, we see this especially in California. In your chemical section, when I work in my shop, I have one bottle of protective cream on my station. And I put that protective cream on my station and I know when to use that. But what we see in California is we have separate bags packed with different protective creams in to remind them when to use them. These will be taken away. They'll be left with one anyway. Okay? And like I said, you have a client, a bag of chemicals anyway. You don't have separate sections in that bag. It's all just one big bag you dump out. So everything is back bar, and you have to remember that. I'm going to use this over and over and over again. So things that I use on my station all day, my first aid kit, those types of things are all multi-use. Nothing is ever a single-use item, okay, or a single-use container. They all have to be labeled in English, and we'll talk about labeling as we go through the exam. There can't be any, if you create a label, this one's kind of crazy because it says, right here on the bottle, it has a manufacturer label that says hand sanitizer. And then somebody thought we needed to know it was hand sanitizer, so they put another label on it. It says hand sanitizer. This factory label was sufficient. And a factory label, of course, can be multi-language. But if you make this little white label for any type of a bottle, it can only have English on it. Okay, that's an OSHA regulation, so only English. Some of the unacceptable labeling we see, first off, we see a lot of PD or predisposition. That's another thing. If I could put predisposition in a bottle, my children would be awesome, you know, because I could squirt a little on them in the morning, they'd be good all day long. And I would be great, but that's not predisposition inside that jar. What's inside that jar is color or tint, correct? It's an aniline derivative. And when we do the predisposition and strand test, we use color. We don't use predisposition, okay? So make sure that these are actually labeled what's inside those containers, not what they do, okay? If they're labeled what they do, they'll be taken away. Again, the massage. Remember the massage cream? This was something also that we see a lot. We see things numbered. So in this case, this was an aesthetics exam. They said, okay, we're going to cleanse first, we're going to exfoliate second, and massage third. Well, that's cheating, isn't it? This person should already know that's the sequence that I do things in. So we no longer let them have that option of organizing sequences. They dump it out of a bag. They organize it according to the sequence that they do, which is important. So make sure that they're not putting steps on anything or numbers on anything. All they're doing is labeling products and know when to use those products. Another thing that we see a lot of, supplies do not need to be labeled. I see rolls of paper towels written on each paper towel, paper towel, paper towel, paper towel, paper towel. We already know it's a paper towel, right? We already know that it's combs. We already know that they're spatulas. So these types of containers in my universal supplies or so forth that I put on my station all day, my gloves don't need to be labeled. I don't need a label on those. My spatulas, I don't need a label on those. So what this used to do in the old examination formats was this was telling us what we had in our kits, wasn't it? We had a baggie and it had everything in it for that one section. Well, we don't do that anymore, so make sure we're not labeling supplies. They should know what supplies are, and your examiners absolutely know what those supplies are. So you don't need to label them. The only thing up there that needed to be labeled was color. Okay? So don't label those supplies. Also, I say this every time, get rid of those snorkel tip bottles that you have to open with your thumb or your finger. You know, every time I touch the end of that container and let go of that bottle, in goes the bacteria. So you're actually seeing these disappear off the open shelves in the supermarkets now because of the infection control problems that they're having with them. But use some other type of mechanism, a pump or a snap cap or something else that's easier for that candidate to use. So let's talk about how's the industry changed. And the number one reason the industry changed is infection, bacteria, diseases now that kill us rather than just make us sick. And so it's important that we understand how these diseases work and how these bacteria work. We are dealing with the Godzilla of superbugs, I call them, MRSA and VRSA. These things are running rampant. I told my father in December, do not go to this particular barber shop. It's dirty. Well, he likes the barber there. Sid's his friend, so he likes to go there. And he went in December, against my better judgment, and got MRSA in his scalp from a pair of clippers. He spent weeks in the hospital getting rid of that MRSA in his scalp. We have a member of NIC who walked past the massage table in his cosmetology school, scratched his leg, got a flesh-eating bacteria, and has had 28 surgeries and is now 2 years into rehab. But he saved his leg. These are dangerous bacteria that are growing, and these are surface bacteria. The MRSA that we deal with isn't the hospital that grows in the drain type MRSA. This is on our skin. And we all have MRSA. And our MRSA is unique to us. So yes, we can give it to our children, we can give it to our spouses. MRSA is running rampant. We need to disinfect surfaces, don't we? Because that's where it's growing. We need to know how to sanitize our hands. We need to know that we actually need to sanitize our hands. The examiners in California are telling me they're simulating sanitation. They're not actually sanitizing their hands. We expect them to pump sanitizer actually into their hands and sanitize their hands. We expect them to actually disinfect the station. We don't know what happened on that before they got there. It's their own protection. It's also displaying that they understand how to disinfect, and we're going to talk about that as well. But this is really important to know that MRSA and VRSA are out there, and they're killing people. We're losing limbs over that. A friend of mine who works in another industry, he actually got MRSA on his leg. He was a very large gentleman, about 500 pounds. Now he weighs 90 pounds, and he has one leg, but he's alive. So, we don't want these things to happen. A couple different ones. One was the NIC with the nail file. You can probably pick out which one that one was. And when MRSA establishes itself, they have to, cut the skin around or clean it. And so you're lucky to save the limb first off. But it's also a very large process and a very large scarring process if you can survive it. But the hand injury that you see there was actually a hair splinter or a hair sliver that got in this gentleman's hand. He eventually lost his hand over that splinter. So, the days of open-toed shoes in the salon, as far as I'm concerned, start wearing your shoes again. These hair splinters are dangerous. We don't see as much with barbering. Well, actually, I'll take that back. I see a lot more flip-flops. You got to be careful with that sort of thing because you don't want to be losing your leg. It's very important. But those are the types of things we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of HPV, dirty wax pots. This is actually herpes of the eye, which was contracted through a wax pot. And interesting enough, I show you this. I know, in barbering, you're saying, why are you showing me this? It's because if we support these type of businesses, we are hurting our own industry. If I go get a pedicure and they bring out a tote tray and you see dirty implements in that tote tray and you don't walk out, you're part of the problem. You really are. Because if I see a tote tray, I have to know that that tote tray was emptied out before it came there, that it was completely washed out with soap and water, that it was disinfected, that everything that went back in that tote tray was disinfected before it went back in that plastic tray. And once it, the files and buffers have to be new. So, those are the types of things that I want you to understand is that it's not just barbering, it's everybody. We all have to watch out for this. We all have to be part of our industry. And if we go into a dirty barber shop, we need to educate them. We need to keep ours clean so people understand that they can come there and be safe. And I think that's very important to understand. So get rid of those types of things, the totes and stuff, and we'll talk about those. But this was a wax pot. This person came in for a Brazilian wax or a genital wax. The wax stick was double dipped inside this wax. The next client that came in got an eyebrow wax, and that's how the herpes was contracted. So these types of things are you think about your own industries, there's other ways to spread these diseases as well. So, wiping tips of things and so forth. So we need to really be careful and really be conscious of what's going on in our industry. The macrobacteriums, I was actually working with a senator in Alabama. I think I've told you this story before, but he didn't understand it. And up to a few years ago, regulated. So you could pay $5 in most counties and be a barber. And that's what deregulation looks like. You just go get a business license and you're it. So he was defending the fact that they didn't need licensure. And he said, I always pay an extra $1 for a clean blade when I go in for my shaves. And I said, well, don't you think you should get a clean blade anyway, right? That's just good. It's dermaplaning, there's blood contact, there's all these things. You should be getting a clean blade with every single shave. Oh, wow. We got into this conversation. He said, well, I still get these little red bumps on the back of my neck. Well, that's the macrobacterium because they never disinfected the razor. So those are the types of things we talk about to these people to try to get regulation in place. Well, in Alabama, most counties now are regulated, and we're very, very happy about that. But this is the types of, your nail spa. Remember the foot tubs? Getting rashes on their legs? It affected us all over the country. I could not beg a pedicure in my salon when that stuff was going on, And it was important to me to rebuild that business. So we affect each other. So let's make sure that we understand what infection control is and we keep things clean. It also goes on social media. And like I said, this isn't just the nail industry. This is everybody. We're seeing barbers and cosmetologists with half a head of hair, not because they're naturally losing their hair, but because they've gotten MRSA or infection in their scalp from scratching their heads while they're doing their services. We've seen a lot of clients like my father who are getting MRSA from clippers and dirty implements and so forth. So it's important that we understand what's happening today in the industry, not what we learned 15, 20 years ago, because it is very, very, very different. You know, when I took my exam 30 some odd years ago, things were a lot different. You know, I actually learned some really bad techniques, like using my mouth to, you know, and spit to sharpen a makeup brush, and you know, different things like that. And testing, I saw the other day somebody spit test an iron in a barber exam. You know, they put it, see if the iron was hot. So those types of things have gone away. We can't do those things anymore. But that's things we learned in school 20, 30 years ago that were okay to do. But there are a lot of different types of disinfectants out there. They have to have an original manufacturer label. That's an OSHA requirement. If it's on your SDS sheet, it has to have a manufacturer label. I'm going to show you some of the examples that I've seen here, but they have to have a label. They have to be EPA registered and shop, salon, spa grade. That's the same as hospital grade. It's just a little bit of labeling, how they're changing around. Our examinations say hospital grade, which is a salon grade. If I've got it at a reputable barber supply house, it's going to be okay. If I bought it at a supermarket, chances are 90% it's not. So make sure that they understand what real disinfectant is, how to use real disinfectant, so they don't have the problems my father had in their shop. And they get on social media because they've given somebody MRSA. So they need to understand what it is. One of the things that I did in my school when I had it was I made sure that when they came in for orientation, it was on a Friday. And I would tell them, before you come back on Monday, you need to go online and go to the Barberside website. And they have an infection control certification program. It's free. Go on there, and when you come in Monday, I want that certificate. They started out in school knowing what infection control was. The problem was I had to take it as well, so I understood. But I made sure they were all Barberside certified before they ever came to school. Then halfway through their program, I said, you go to the Barberside website and you take their certification program. It's free. You bring back that certificate and we'll put you through into the senior program. And they did. And before they graduated, I said, you go to the Lucaside website and you take their certification program. When they walked out of my school and went to take their exam, they had 3 infection control certifications from 3 different companies, 3 different aspects of infection control. They had no doubt in their mind what infection control was. And they did very well on their examinations. So those are some free tools that you can use that I like to pass along. In our September overview, we've actually invited our disinfection specialist from Barberside to come and talk to you a little bit. And so we're going to have her here as well. She's actually confirmed with me that she'll be here. And she's going to actually be part of this presentation and talk to you a little bit about infection control so you understand it. It's a great program. So let's use those. They're free. They're our industry. But the main thing that we need to look at is that our salon, barbering, whatever grade, hospital grade disinfectants are virucidal, bactericidal, and fungicidal. Fungicidal is what most of them are missing. So as long as you're using the reputable ones from the stores that you shop at, not the grocery stores, but the actual barbering houses are what you want to use. But some of those are premixes, and we need labels. So Barberside, Lucaside, you have to go online and download their labels. Their labels have to be applied to the bottle so they can be read, and they have to be the complete label. So these bottom 2 illustrations or pictures that were actually taken here in the state of California, those are not disinfectants that you can use. Those disinfectants would be graded off because I can't read the labels. You have to be able to read the label. A first responder, if someone ingested this, a first responder would have to be able to read that label to see what the poison control information was on, It also has a disposal. All that information has to be visible. So if this would be graded off for a labeling error, because this isn't a manufacturer label properly displayed. Some of the other things we see, this is the front label for the Marvicide. That was great. When we turned the bottle around, there was other labels. The back one actually said Windex window cleaner. So now we don't know what it is. A first responder wouldn't know how to respond to that. So they would have to do toxicology and all kinds of things. Someone would really suffer because of that labeling. So make sure if it's on your SDS sheet, it has a manufacturer label. In this examination, the only thing that has to have a manufacturer label is your disinfectant and your hand sanitizer. The rest of them can be created labels or manufacturer labels. Here's some other great examples. Don't put your disinfectant in a baggie with a rag or a towel. Your disinfectant should sit on your station just like it does naturally in your barber shop. That's where it sits. It should be displayed naturally as it does in your barber shop or in your school. Don't put it in a baggie separate from everything else. It's a universal supply. It needs to be out and used. Anything left in bags will be graded off. Okay, so make sure this isn't happening. Also, it has to be the actual liquid. Make sure that it's not colored so that they can see water inside of a bottle. It has to be disinfectant. This is a good Marvicide label because it has the front and the back label, correct? And that's what we need to have. Also, we don't use blood exposure kits anymore. Well, we never did use a blood exposure kit because there really isn't ever one. We don't use blood spill kits anymore. We don't use biohazard labels anymore. We use a first aid kit. You can make your own labeled first aid kit. Don't be fancy and put red crosses on them. Just write first aid kit on them. You can go to the, some of the stores have the little white ones with the cardboard band on them, and you can unload those and reload them so they work. We'll go over that in the blood exposure section. But when I pull that band off, it's no longer labeled, is it? So I need to write on top of that little plastic box first aid kit. But you're able to assemble your own. That's not a problem. But it has to have enough supplies in. If they cut themselves in the shave, if they cut themselves in the haircut, they still have to use that same first aid kit that they're going to use for the blood exposure section. Okay, and we'll kind of cover that as we go through the examination. But it's not a blood exposure kit, it's a first aid kit. The secondary bag that they use, do not mark contaminated. It's just a bag. And we'll talk about that as well. We only label what? Products, right? And our supplies need to be labeled if they, it's a first aid kit, some type of sanitizers. If it's a water bottle, it needs to say water on it. So that's what we label. But a contaminated bag is a mislabel. We don't need to mark that. Again, those totes, get rid of them. They can't be disinfected. Don't use anything that cannot be disinfected. Do not teach them in your schools to use anything in their shops that cannot be disinfected. This is very, very important. Here's some examples of something I saw in some examinations, and I just want to, I bring this up in every overview because I think it's important that you understand. First off, this bag says, it's hard to read, but it says to be discarded. And really what that bag is their trash bag. It should say trash. We use universal terms. We use terms that are easy to translate. We use terms that everyone understands. When I go across the country and I go to the grocery store, if I go to New Hampshire, I use a carriage to carry my groceries. If I go to South Carolina, I use a buggy to carry my groceries. If I come to California or Utah, I use a shopping cart. Therefore, if I say shopping cart in South Carolina, they know what I'm talking about. If I told you buggy, you would think of maybe a horse-drawn carriage or something of that sort. So we use universal terms. And universal terms are important because everybody understands them. So in your CIB, it says I needed one marked trash, correct? So that's exactly what it has to say is trash. The next one that we look at is this soiled implement. First of all, get rid of these boxes off the table. Put a bag on the floor. It's much easier for them to put their contaminated items into a bag on the floor. You have to remember these bags themselves, and this one should say to be disinfected probably. So my to be disinfected bag can be opened up. I would definitely put liners inside them in case they leak. That's important. But I would definitely put a liner inside these, fold them back up and put them in the kits. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But This to be disinfected bag, I'm going to label on all four sides. I'm going to label my trash bag on all four sides. My soiled linens on all four sides. Because no matter how they put that underneath that station, they can see it. And that's important that they put things in here. Because what are we really evaluating with this bag? What I'm really evaluating is the process. I'm not evaluating a garbage can or a trash can. I'm evaluating things that are going to go to the landfill. That I, as a competent practitioner, know that that neck strip now needs to be thrown in the trash and carried off to the landfill. I know that that razor that I just used is going to be a process of disinfection, or that comb that I used, or my clippers, or my clipper guards, all have to be disinfected, don't they? So this is what it's telling NIC, and what it's telling your examiners is that there's a process to that item. That process is disinfection. Okay? So that's important to know. We don't evaluate that they know that process. We evaluate that they know it has to have that process done to it. Okay? So that's all this bag is. So don't get really complicated and think you need it covered and all those things. We're not evaluating a trash can. We're evaluating trash. All right? Things that need to go to the landfill. This one was an interesting one. Biohazard is what that says on it. Well, that's not even a biohazard bag. That's really nothing but a mislabel. If this person had actually brought a biohazard bag, it would have one of these labels or it would be this bag, correct? We don't need this. Don't bring this. A blood spill kit is for 20 milliliters or more of blood on the floor. If you've caused that, you better be calling 911. And not only that, you're going to have a kit to clean up that coagulated blood. So it's a different scenario than what we have. We've nicked someone with a razor. We've cut our own finger. We've caused a small injury, and we need to know how to deal with blood present. So it's not a blood exposure kit. It is a first aid kit. That's how we deal with blood present. All right, so make sure that they're not bringing biohazard labels. No biohazard labels. Don't bring them. Just bring a first aid kit, and I'll show you exactly what to put in there and exactly where to find that information, okay, when we go through the blood exposure. One of the other great things we see, let's just take this Barbicide premix and put a nozzle on it and spray it on the station. That'll kill anything. Well, it's kind of like using Clippercide for a disinfectant. That's not correct, is it? Clippercide is not a surface disinfectant. It's oily. It's made for mechanical tools. So a surface disinfection would be your Barbicide mixed correctly, right? Mixed according to manufacturer's directions. So this is what we want to see. We want to see that they're competent, that they understand that they have to mix that Barbicide, that the Barbicide that they mixed has to be labeled with a post-mix label, whatever they downloaded off the internet, okay? That goes on their SDS sheet. So none of that. Also, things on the floor. We get a lot of people that think I can just throw down some newspaper or a paper towel during the haircut and I can just clean that up really easy afterwards just by folding up that plastic or so forth. Nothing can ever be on their floor. Nothing ever on the floor. If they drop a comb, immediately, I bend down, I pick the comb up, I put it in my disinfected, to be disinfected bag, and I get out, sanitize my hands and get out a clean comb. We have to make our candidates understand and take away some of this test anxiety. I always say, I remember my examination, even, as far away as it was, I remember exactly what happened. I remember what that examiner, their breath smelled like. That's how much I remember. And your candidates are going to remember the same thing. But that fear that I felt is unnecessary. This examination is based on things that happen and how I deal with them. I don't panic because I cut myself. I do a blood exposure procedure and take care of it just like I would in real life, and I don't lose any points for it. I did the right thing. If I drop a comb and I leave it on the floor, I did the wrong thing, didn't I? I need to pick that up immediately, sanitize my hands, get a clean comb out and start working. It was no big deal. So it's things that happen and how I deal with them. And if you start educating your candidates to understand that, they come in a little different. They come in not so afraid. And that's important because I do crazy things when I'm scared. So, I might have memorized that exam from cover to cover and I come in, I just forgot it all because I'm nervous. So the more you take them through that, the more relaxed they feel. If they drop a comb and they stand there, teach them how to do that because that's important in real life. That's what we want them to learn. Okay? Some of the things we do see, bags taped to the table. Get rid of that old habit right now. No more bags taped to the table. There's a lot of complexity to this. I don't know any one of your barber shops that I would walk into and see a bag taped to a table. So just the bag on the floor, says trash on it on all four sides. That's great. That's what we want to see. This was great. I thought this was awesome. They brought brand new bags in. You can tell because they have the tag still on them. So this candidate spent $30 on 3 bags for her examination. The problem with her examination was she had to touch these bags every time she opened them. So get bags that stay open. Like I said, these are just doggy bags from a restaurant. Grocery bags work great. Don't worry that they have a name on them. It really doesn't matter that they have a company name on them. What it matters is we know what's going inside of that bag. So they don't have to be anything special, just something that talks about what's going inside the bag. And this didn't work at all. And these are all actual live examination photos. This person had a really, really hard time. And I felt really, really bad for them. But, you know, it's very unnecessary, very unfortunate. This was actually a station here in California. I can definitely tell you that this person had a very difficult time passing. I saw someone the other day that had a blow dryer box. Why did they have a blow dryer box? They didn't even have a blow dryer in it, and they didn't do the blow drying section. They just wanted us to know that they had a blow dryer. There's really no reason to bring something you're not going to use. So make sure they're bringing things that they utilize. They definitely didn't need a whole grocery sack full of rods of different colors. Those are things they don't need. The disinfectant you see in the far side of the screen, the green bottle standing up was just labeled disinfectant. That doesn't work, does it? Has to have the manufacturer label on it. So you can see a lot of different problems on this examination table, not to mention that underneath there was no closable kit. They're just open bags. So I can pretty much tell you this person had problems. And when they came back to your school and they brought that mannequin head back and you saw that haircut and that haircut was perfect, what would be your first question? Why did they fail the haircut? This is why. So I just answered your question for you. You know, we see it a lot. We see it, you know, they're going to bring back the evidence. You're going to see a great haircut. And they failed the haircut. Oh my gosh, what happened? Well, they didn't maintain their work area in a safe and sanitary manner. I can tell you that right out the gate. Okay? Or they didn't use their tools safely. So there's other aspects to this examination that you don't see that cause them to fail. But we do look at 5 different areas in every NIC examination. First of all, like I said, we look at a blood exposure. What happens if I have an incident where I have blood present? How do I deal with it? And so we do look at that and we do evaluate that. Disposal of items, that's those 3 bags. What's the next process for that item? Is it going to go to the landfill and be trash? Is it going to have a disinfection process? Or is it going to be laundered or sanitized? That's what we want to see, those 3 levels of infection control. Storage standards, that's their kit. I went around the room in a overview the other day. Some lady had taken the exam 57 years ago, and I was very, very happy. 57 years as a barber is a long time. She didn't have to zip her kit. Her kit didn't have to be closed. But the lady I asked, who was licensed 47 years, said yes, I had to shut my kit. So for 47 years in some states, it's been a mandatory requirement. The reason that we shut our kits is because it represents the drawer or the disinfected place that we put items. So once I disinfect my item, where do I put it? Inside of a closed container, correct? That's what that kit represents. So I have to keep that kit covered or shut, don't I? To make sure that nothing's going to get inside that drawer and contaminate those items. So if you teach them how to use their kit that way, it really helps. That's the drawer. And of course I said they can't ever have anything on the floor and nothing ever spillable on the table. If it's spillable, it has to have a lid on it. You know, so if it tips over, it's not going to get all over the floor. And of course, infection control. We're going to talk about that most of the day. I have to sanitize before I, touch my own skin or hair. I have to sanitize before I go back to my client's skin or hair. Those are some of the biggest infection control. Do I sanitize once I touch a container, of trash or soiled linen? If I have to touch that, then I have to sanitize, don't I? My best option is just to drop that comb straight in there and never touch that bag. So that's our objective, is just leave that bag open and drop items into it, okay? So that the examiner can evaluate, you know there's another process to that. If I have to touch something that's contaminated, yes, I always have to sanitize my hand. When I go into my kit or my drawer, I always sanitize my hands to get clean items out. Then I shut my drawer and I go back to work, okay? So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But those are the 5 items that we really look at in the examination. All candidates are required to bring their own kits. Those kits should have a sufficient quantity of supplies, not like that kit we saw, that candidate. She had a whole lot of supplies that would never be used. So make sure that they're bringing enough supplies to utilize, but not too much, because if they bring too much, they're still responsible for it. The kit must be kept closed, as we talked about, and stored under their work area. So what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and set up their workstation. Once they're through setting up their workstation, make sure their kits are slid underneath the table. Make sure those 3 bags that they set up are underneath the table. That's very, very important. Nothing's out there getting tripped over. Cords. You got a lot of clipper cords, and the clippers have to have cords. The reason we evaluate cords, are they on the floor? Are they tripping over them? Are they wrapping them around necks? So we're evaluating those cords. That's why they're important. Remember, they're evaluated at all times. So make sure they understand those types of things. Anything removed from their supply kit has to be disposed of outside their supply kit. So if I take something out of the drawer and set it on the table, it's now contaminated. I cannot put it back in the kit or the drawer. I have to put it in one of those 3 disposal bags after I take it out. Nothing ever goes back inside that drawer. Make sure they understand, don't put anything back in the kit. Once it comes out, they either use it or dispose of it. They must bring their own water. So their spray bottles, make sure they have water in them. Their saturation bottles, make sure they have water in them. Or they can bring a bottle of water and fill them. We don't evaluate filling them. Bring them already prepared. It's the best way to do it. Okay? They're responsible for cleaning the examination area when they're finished. Make sure they understand that. At that point, once they've said your exam's completed, they just clean up their area, put it wherever they need to put it, and get out. They're happy, they're gone, right? Hopefully they got a passing score. But they take everything with them. They're given a minimum of 10 minutes to set up their work areas. Of course, in the haircut section, they only need 10 minutes because they're only setting up a workstation for a haircut. When you get over to the chemical services, then you have 15 minutes because it takes a little longer. So when we watch these examinations go about, we evaluate how much time it's actually taking them. Usually that initial haircut setup's taking about 6 minutes. They have 10 minutes, so there's plenty of time. Okay? They'll be instructed when to clean up. So just get rid of a few items, and we'll talk about kind of how they maintain their stations and work through those different sections. But don't clean up when you're not supposed to. If we say don't take down the rods, don't take down the rods. Because if you take down the rods there, not only did you not follow instructions, which is the #1 safety procedure in our industry, not only did you not follow instructions, but you're now being evaluated probably more critically because you're doing it in the wrong section. It's evaluated a little bit differently in the takedown section. So make sure that you understand to follow the instructions and only do what the examiners are asking you to do. Don't overdo it. One of the biggest things we're seeing in the shave right now, and both sites have confirmed it, they say, complete the 5 shaving strokes, and they come in with stroke number 1, and they say number 1. 1, 1, 1. They want us to make sure that examiner sees it over and over. Well, would you ever really do that on someone's face? It's a natural shave. I'm going to take stroke number 1. If there's a little shaving cream left, I might do a second bumper stroke. Then I'm going to flip it to number 2 and do 1 stroke. Number 3, do 1 stroke. So don't continually do something that you're not supposed to do. In saturation, we say saturate, blah, 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 saturate, blah, blah, blah. You would never do that. You're just taking the chemical right back off the hair. You're going to saturate. If it oversaturates, then I might blot a little bit. Just have them do it the way you teach them to do it, the correct way to do it. There's no examination purpose anymore as far as I have to do it this way. I do it the way you teach me to do it. I'm going to display what you showed me because that's what I'm going to be doing in everyday life. That's what I'm going to be licensed in. And if you teach them to blot every rod, they're not going to make a whole lot of money, and that sort of thing. So make sure that they're doing things the way you teach them to do it. They'll be instructed when to clean up. They'll be instructed when to prepare for other sections, and that's important for them. We always read the verbal instructions twice, and we can only read them twice. And I'll give you a prime example of what happens. In the saturation, this is where we see some kind of comical things happen, but in the saturation, I say, please demonstrate saturation. And the candidate looks at me and said, do I saturate all the rods? Well, first off, the examiner can't help them, can they? You've taught them to saturate all the rods. I know you have. So all the examiner can say is do as you were taught. And the candidate looks at the examiner and says, that didn't help. All the examiner can say is, please demonstrate saturation. That's the second time they've said it, correct? Oh, come on, really? Please demonstrate a test curl. The examiner is just going to continue through the exam. Come on, man, I didn't even demonstrate saturation yet. Please demonstrate a test curl. You're kidding me, right? Please remove one rod from the head. They're going to move right through that section, and they can't answer those questions. We're dealing with some very intelligent people. Millennials and Generation X are very intelligent people because they have Google in their hand 24/7. And I can't really talk about texting because I ran into a pole at the airport texting the other day. But we always have information in our hand, don't we? And we've become a very, very high-thinking society because if I want to know something, what do? I Google it. Well, what we've done is we've taken that secondary brain away from them. They no longer have Google in their hands, and they want the examiner to answer the questions that Google would have answered. Okay? And we can't. We are standardized. We can't help one person, or we'd have to go around the country and say, yes, you saturate all the rods. Every single person for the rest of the examination would have to be told the same thing. So we can't tell them anything. So make sure that they come, they demonstrate things competently, and they just walk through it like they're normally going to do it. They don't wait for the examiner to see anything. Once the examiner says go, they go. Okay, we'll talk a lot about how that works. But they're expected to demonstrate a task till they're finished. Don't just roll 3 rods and step back. You know, if we say roll the back panel from crown to nape. So that's important that they do that. They will be instructed to step back when they're finished, but remember, once they step back, they are finished, and the examination could go forward. If I step back, the first thing I tell my candidates is, don't look around the room, because it's going to confuse you. You did the very best you could with what you had available upstairs, and that's important. But when I start looking around the room and I see that somebody started rolling rods at the forehead, oh my gosh. So I step forward and I start rolling rods at the forehead, where I was actually told something differently. So make sure, first of all, they don't look around the room. That's very, very important. And that they continue to demonstrate when they're finished, step back once they're finished. They can step forward if time is still going. But once time is called, that section is over. Okay? And we'll talk about some problems that we see in these sections when they step back before it's completed. Also, like I said, everything's performed the way you teach them. There's no longer a specific way to do it. They do it the way you teach them. Verbal instructions are read twice, as I said. They're expected to perform all tasks. To be instructed to step back. And I just want to reiterate all that because it's so important that they do things the way you teach them to. They are responsible for maintaining their work area in a safe and sanitary manner. They must bring all items to get into the site, their IDs and so forth. Have them come to the examination ready to work. They're not going to the bed. They're not going to the prom. They're going to work. Send them to work. Okay? Make sure they're dressed appropriately. Make sure their hair is maintained. You know, it's our responsibility now as educators to educate these candidates on how to work every day. How to dress, how to fix their hair so they're not constantly having to deal with their hair issues. Because no longer can I be dealing with my hair issues, I'd be sanitizing my hands all day long. So teach them how to maintain themselves and how to work. So as you see somebody do something in the school, Even though it's maybe not during an evaluation process, if you see them cross-contaminate something, you need to talk to them about it. If you see them come to school not ready to work, maybe there's an issue there that you need to talk about. Everything's been so watered down now that we need to educate people on how to go to work. And so they don't harm other people. That's what's important, correct? You know, watches, bracelets in the industry. I love my bracelets and my watches, but I don't wear them to work because they drag through everything all day long. And when I go home at night and I hug my children, what did I just do? I just contaminated them with everybody's juju I worked on all day long. And that's terrible when you think about it that way. So I teach my students not to wear bracelets anymore, not to wear watches anymore. Put a clock on the wall. They're just much easier to see. And they're not grabbing in people's hair either. So those are the types of things in the industry. Brushes. If I bring a brush and it has a wood handle, it is disposable. You cannot disinfect wood. You cannot disinfect painted wood. So neck brushes. If they have an acrylic handle and they have acrylic bristles and they're disinfected according to manufacturer's directions, you can reuse that brush. That would go into items to be disinfected, right? If you can use a neck brush in California, you can't use a neck brush at all in Utah anymore. So, you know, look at those old traditional things that we did in barbering and teach them the best practice. Probably the best practice is to use a towel, not a neck brush. Okay? So, because that neck brush, if any brush had a wood handle, it would go straight to the trash, wouldn't it? Single use. To make sure they understand those types of things. The mannequins and supplies, make sure they arrive without odor. Nothing worse than working next to someone with a stinky head. It's very distracting to the other candidates. It stinks. So make sure they've washed the heads out good before they bring them and they're prepared properly. Don't ever bring a head straight out of the box. Beat that hair up good so that the hair functions. The way this haircut and the mannequins work now, you know, you can technically find some old cosmetology mannequins for the haircut and give them one more life, you know, because it doesn't have to be a male mannequin. They can cut any hair, right? So we don't look at gender-specific mannequins anymore. They can use any mannequin head they want. So if you've got someone you know in a cosmetology school and they're done with those mannequin heads, get them from them. They can use them in the exam for that one last haircut and then they're done. So that's a good way to do it. But they will need to bring another mannequin head for the chemical section. Just so you know, they'll need 2 mannequins for this one. But make sure you beat that hair up so it functions for them. So important. They also need to know how to use their tripods. Make sure they understand how to use the equipment that they brought. We get a lot of them come in, they don't know how to use a tripod. They got a tripod they've never seen before. They have disinfectant they've never seen before. They don't know what it is. So make sure they're really familiar with the supplies and things, the equipment that come in those kits. And they're able to use them because the examiners can't help them with them. Okay? They always raise their hand, you know, I can't get the legs down on it. Well, we can't help them. Do as you were taught. That's all we can tell them. Candidates must not leave the examination area without permission. If they experience an emergency, they need to raise their hand and have someone come over and help them. If they need to use the bathroom or, you know, they're feeling faint or going to throw up, that's definitely the time to raise your hand, all right? If they need to walk out. But, you know, plan your time. If you got done with your haircut early, that's a great time to go to the restroom. But we only let one person out of the room at a time also, so make sure they plan their time. Examiners have been instructed not to answer any questions. That ensures equal opportunity and standardization of the exam. The only thing that the examiners are ever going to tell those candidates is do the best you can with what you have available and do as you were taught. That's the only statements they're going to hear. Do I saturate all the rods? Do as you were taught. My razor fell apart. What do I do? Do the best you can with what you have available. So those are the things that you need to understand need to happen. Okay? Okay, so we're going to move on into the barbering section. Do I have any questions that are related specifically to what we've just talked about? Yes?
You mentioned that they can use mannequins from Cosmos for the test itself. If it's treated already, is that okay, or do they have to be virgin?
No, they can, as long as there's hair to cut.
Oh.
Yeah, they're good. Yes.
And you talked about clippers with cords. Nowadays, with the cordless clippers, are those available?
If you give cordless clippers to your students, they can bring them, but all you need to really do is plug in the charging cord and just have them maintain the charging cord. If it really, I can't imagine a clipper without a charging cord. If they were wireless charging ones, I haven't seen those yet, but they could come out in the future where
You know, if they maybe charged it or they came in and just had it.
they still have to have a cord. Yeah. You can simulate a cord with about a 4-foot string taped to them, but the charging cord is much more natural to plug in and just let them maintain the charging cord.
Is there an escort when someone goes to the restroom, or they just leave and can go to the restroom alone?
When they go to the restroom, they generally will leave some kind of identification when they leave. When they come back, they're checked back in. Any other questions? There are processes anyway within the examination room when people leave. Yes, sir. Hold on one second.
Regarding the shave, is it still 14 points?
We'll talk about it when we get to the
Oh,
shave.
does it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because you're going to love the shave. You really are. The shave's awesome. Okay. All right, let's move forward then. Oh, one more. Okay, go ahead.
You said it was a Marvicide and Barbicide to get the certification free on the website. It was one more that you said.
Leukocyte.
Leukocyte.
Yeah. And Leukocyte comes in passion pink and tidy bow blue, so you can match it to about anything. It's great. Yes, sir.
What happens if they don't clean up after the test is over?
They'll be directed to go back and clean their station.
Oh, okay, not points taken away or failed.
Well, I really can't tell you what the evaluation includes, but they do need to clean up their station at the end. Some examinations, yes, some examinations, no. Some parts of it, yes, some parts of it, no. So make sure they're just cleaning up when they're told to. And they're only cleaning up what they're told to clean up. Like I said, the number one thing in our industry that we are concerned with is following instructions. If I don't follow instructions and apply something to someone and hurt them, then I'm liable. So we want them to know that they need to follow instructions. So make sure they're following the instructions based on the examination. When we got to the actual test writing portion, NIC did, and we understood that it doesn't matter who you are or what career field you work in cosmetology or barbering, aesthetics, nails, you're still going to have the same setup procedures. It's still the same thing. So you'll see that we've generalized a lot of things. And they say, well, it's different for us. Well, no, it's not. It's still just the same processes. It might look different. You're setting up different equipment, but the same processes are in place, and that's what we're evaluating. So as you prepare your work area for your client, you'll set up the universal supplies you'll use throughout the examination. You'll also set up the supplies for the hair cutting section of the examination. So this is our client one, right? Our client one bag and our universal supply bag. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, infection control. You'll have 10 minutes to complete this section. You'll be informed when you have 5 minutes remaining. Do not demonstrate any procedures until the verbal instructions are given and you're instructed to begin. Step back to indicate you finished. We're going to, again, read those verbal instructions a second time, and you may begin. We cannot read them a third time. We always have someone raise their hand or, at times, could you read that again? No. They need to be paying attention. Anytime there's instructions being given, tell them to stand up and listen. Don't keep doing what they're doing because they're nervous they didn't get something done. That maybe doesn't have anything to do with what the examiner is going to be telling them. So stand up, listen to what the examiner has to say, and then go back to work doing what you were doing. Okay? Make sure they're listening. So the first procedure that we always do in every single type of procedure, in any of our career fields, is to disinfect our work area. That's very important. So they'll be disinfecting the work area with that hospital level or shop level, salon, spa level disinfectant, wherever the EPA lands on that. Okay? So they have to use that disinfectant that's virucidal, bactericidal, and fungicidal. If you bought it at a reputable barber house, it's going to be okay. All right? So they have to disinfect that entire workstation. They no longer can use the shelves or the cubby holes inside those workstations. We're talking about the surface, right? The surface of the workstation. They have to actually disinfect. Don't put water in the bottles. Don't put colored water in the bottles. Use a disinfectant. That's for their own safety. all right? We don't want to teach them how to not disinfect. So make sure that they're using that. They're going to wet that whole area. They can use a wipe. They can use a spray and a towel, okay? Either way is fine. Either way is proper, correct? We don't evaluate the surface time because they're all different. So they just need to make sure that's disinfected, saturated the entire surface, and then they can start sanitizing their hands and setting up their supplies for the haircut. Okay? And I'll kind of break this down in a minute. They're going to set up their universal supplies. So as you do your state boards in your schools, understand that the only thing that we grade in the setup section are the universal supplies. We're grading the bag labels. Make sure we have trash to be disinfected and soil linens written on those bags. We're looking at the first aid kit because this is where it's set out. Does it say first aid kit on it? So we're evaluating the labels of the universal supplies. My spray bottle of water if I choose to bring one. If they set it out here, that's a universal supply. Is it not? Sits on my workstation all day. So things that sit on their workstation all day, gloves, spatulas, that's what we're looking at. Okay? And again, only products have to have labels, correct? And only disinfectant and hand sanitizers have to have a manufacturer label. I can create labels, but they can only have English. It's always better to send manufacturer labels. It's just easier for them. They're familiar with those. Then, once I'm through with something, once I'm through disinfecting my station with my paper towel or my wipe, I throw it in my trash bag. So if you look at that last task line, it says items to be disinfected, soil linens, and trash are disposed of in a correct manner throughout the section. That is where I put something. That's all that's about. And if I touch a bag, did I sanitize my hand? So when I said infection control and safety had gone away, it didn't. The task lines went away. But I told you about the no statements underneath each task line, right? That's the criteria of how they can fail or pass that. Those no statements are what the examiners are trained on. No, they didn't disinfect. You know, they simulated hand sanitation. Those types of things are what they'll be graded off for. But the bottom two of each one of those tasks, and I'm going to tell you straight out, is one is follows infection control procedures. So while disinfecting, did I follow infection control procedures? Did I go back in my kit and contaminate it? Did I touch a trash bag and not sanitize? So those are the types of things that we're looking at in every single task. Is there something on my floor? Did it remain on my floor? Okay, so safety is in there as well, every single task. So make sure that you understand that. Every task is being evaluated not only for the disinfection stage of number one, but it's also the infection control and safety that's being performed by the candidate as well in number one. In number two, it's not all about hand sanitation. I'm sanitizing my hands, but I'm also, my work area is safe, and I'm following infection control procedures throughout that. So each one of those is being evaluated for health and safety, okay, as well. Any questions on the actual setup? I disinfect. I'm going to set up my universal supplies. I was also told to set up my hair cutting supplies, wasn't I? So I would pick up my client one bag that I said was client one, and I'm going to empty out my clippers, set up my shears, or set up my combs, my guards, my detachable blades, whichever I choose to bring. So all those hair cutting supplies, a razor, correct? I'm going to need a razor to shave the neck. My shaving cream needs to be a universal supply here. So really look at that, you know, and in that suggested supply list, I want you to understand that in some sections you'll see specific items listed over and over in each section. That's a reminder that you have to use them there, yes, but you can only bring one. And we'll talk about that when we get to the chemicals. Wait 1 second.
During the work area client preparation setup, and seeing that this is the first client you're just now starting, you take everything out the bag, put on the table, regardless to whether it's the haircut, the shave, or chemicals, and zip the bag up and put it under the table at
Okay,
that
so
point.
Let's talk about that, okay? That's a great question. When I'm through emptying out my universal supply bag, maybe you chose to do that, right? So I've dumped this out on the table. It's now empty. Throw it in the trash. Once I get my client one bag dumped out for my haircut, I'm going to throw that in the trash. My shaving or client two bag is still inside my kit. I'm only setting up for the first client. Great scenario, thank you. One second.
The only reason why I asked with the Cosmos, they take everything out, the zip bag. And I was wondering, is there a difference with
They
the
would only be,
barbers?
no, in the Cosmos as well, they're only taking out client one supplies. They would only take out the chemical supplies in the second client. So we're, just kind of pay attention to how we're doing this, and it'll kind of explain to you how that, because they're all done the same.
As far as the setup goes, do we disinfect the table, manicure table, or are we allowed to?
Everything that they're going to use, every work surface that they're going to be utilizing needs to be disinfected. So
And
if
we
they're going
could
to use
just-
the manicure table, if they're going to use it, it needs to be disinfected
At that time or as part of the disinfection?
as part of the disinfection.
Okay.
Each client. And we'll talk about the second client in a minute. Yes, ma'am.
When they transition from the work session where you have all your universal supplies and they transition to the manicure table, they should disinfect both surfaces again.
That's correct. If I'm going to use the manicure table and the workstation, both work surfaces need to be disinfected prior to use on each client. And we'll talk about the second client, as I said, but yes, you have to clean each one of them with disinfectant prior to setting anything on them.
So with barbers, we have a lot of aerosol cans for our disinfectants. What would we replace that with?
You don't need to bring Clippercide or Clipper Cool because we're not demonstrating cleaning clippers. We would put them into the disinfected bag to demonstrate that we knew that they had to be disinfected after we used them. So really all you have to bring is a surface disinfectant. And you can use a wipe, you can use Barbicide, Marvicide, anything you want to use, but we're concerned mostly in demonstrating the surface disinfection because they're going to be using the surface. As far as the clippers, we consider them to be clean, and their shears and so forth, when they bring them in, we expect them to be cleaner. They'll be marked off if they appear to be dirty. If there's hair or anything in those clippers, they're going to be marked off for being dirty. But we assume everything coming out of that kit is clean. It's coming out of a disinfected area. It's a clean item. So again, don't bring any aerosols. You know, kind of converse and understand that we don't need to demonstrate clipper cleaning. All right? The clipper cleaning is done as part of the disinfection process that you've already taught them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm confirming that when you use a prep towel, you don't have to re-disinfect, you just have to get rid of the SMA or torn paper towel?
Okay, so let's talk about SMA.
All right.
First off, SMA's gone away. There's no such thing as an SMA anymore. When I took my exam, I had an SMA, so I know what you're talking about. But the thing that you have to understand is we're working on an actual workstation. The workstation has to be completely disinfected for every single client that walks through the door. So when we talk about the client change, I'll kind of go over how we transition that. Initially, in this first setup, we're going to disinfect the station just like it's the beginning of our day. Okay? We're just going to set everything up that's already clean coming out of the kit or out of our drawer. All right? If you choose to use a protective covering on the workstation, to answer your question, it has to be disinfected underneath first. And that has to be taken away for each client and a new one replaced. So the paper towel, if you use a paper towel or whatever, I would get rid of that way of doing things. Disinfect the workstation. If you choose to put a paper towel or a towel down to set your tools on, that's fine to do, but the disinfection is the main process. You can actually set those tools right on the bare station. Okay?
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So I know that you have to disinfect the station, then you can put down your prep towel and then the paper towel. Now, if the towel doesn't get soiled, can they just switch out the paper towel, or do they have to remove the prep towel regardless?
Okay, that's kind of a complicated question
Okay.
because, remember, this is client one. So I've just disinfected and I'm going to cut their hair and shave them. Okay? The shave is actually a new client, correct? So in the current examination, and that's why I'm saying it this way, we have one client through the whole exam. So in the current examination, I disinfect once, I put down my towel once. It's good for every single thing I do because I never change to a new person. But this setup is specific to one person. So you've walked through my door, you're going to be sitting in the chair. I'm disinfecting the station to protect you. I'm putting down a clean towel or paper towel or however you teach them to do it is fine. The thing we evaluate is the disinfection. Once that client walks out of that room and you introduce a new client for the shave, all that stuff is going to have to go away and clean stuff brought out. Just a regular station transition. Okay, great questions. Because this is new for you, you know.
Yeah, I understand you're doing away with some of the other evaluations like SMA and things like that. Would you still keep the format for the written, still be expected to know those things, or is that is gone as well, not expected to ask that?
The written examination, actually, you need to kind of look at the CIB for the written exam, and it'll show you the weights of things. We don't ever examine on a SMA. Like I said, that whole process of SMAs has gone away. It's all about disinfection and complete cleanup after one client to another.
Hi. Is the razor still has a blade in it, or are you simulating the blade?
That's a state question. Can you simulate a blade here? Yes, you can simulate a blade.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you some different ways to do that.
Do you need the trimmers as well and the clippers?
If you train them to use trimmers and clippers, trimmers can come without a cord.
Mm-hmm.
The clippers have to have a cord. The trimmers don't have to have a cord if you choose to have them bring trimmers. I'll kind of go through the haircut and kind of show you how I would teach it just for the examination. But if you teach them with trimmers, send them with trimmers. Okay? If you don't teach them with trimmers, they don't need them. They could do a shear over comb or something instead. Okay, so we're good on the first setup. And we're going to go over that again. Remember, on the second setup, we're going to kind of go over a transition period and show you. Okay, so you need to disinfect the table, the manicure table, correct? The counter, and the stool. Everything that's working in that station has to be disinfected. And they do have a stool in that station. So that's in the initial setup, and that will be in the second setup as well. Once time's been called on that, or everyone's stepped back, we go ahead and go on to the haircutting section. And like I said, we set up the universal supplies, and that's the labels we graded in the setup. If they brought any haircutting supplies, we didn't grade those in the setup. So if they're going to use a spray bottle of water and they didn't set it up here, we didn't grade that in the universal supply setup, did we? They're going to, maybe they forgot it, and during the haircut they bring out the spray bottle. The first thing you're going to see is a haircutting supply now, right? Because it came out during the haircut. This is kind of the logistics of the examination. As we go through, I want you to kind of let that sink for a minute, and as I go through, I'll explain why I'm telling you that. But now we're expecting them to perform a haircut. If you'll just hold your questions to the end, then I'll try to get through them before we get there. But you'll perform a tapered haircut with no block line at the nape. You'll demonstrate clipper cutting with and without guard or detachable blade. You'll demonstrate the use of shear over comb. You'll demonstrate fingers and shear cutting. You'll cut at least a ½ inch of hair throughout the haircut. You'll be expected to complete and blend the haircut. So let's stop there. This is an awesome haircut. Right now we're telling you, in the current examination process till September, right? You cut the nape with what? Clipper over comb, correct? You cut the sides with detachable blades or guards, correct? And you cut the top with shears. Well, what we're telling you now is you're going to do 4 different techniques or 4 different methods anywhere you want to do it. But they have to do all 4 methods. Okay? So I'm going to give you some examples of how maybe they can accomplish those 4 methods, because everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute, how do I do that? So I'm going to give you some examples of ways to shortcut those methods and make them work. Okay? But they're also going to be expected to shave both sides of the neck, because we want to demonstrate the reverse backhand, correct? So all 4 shaving strokes are now evaluated in this exam. This is the stroke that's currently missing, right? So don't remove the hair clippings. This all works the same way. It doesn't work any different logistically. They're going to cut the hair. They're going to step back. They're going to be told when to clean up. They're going to get the haircut checked, told when to clean up. Okay? It all works the same way. I'm just trying to explain to you that now they don't have to, as of September, they won't have to cut the hair in certain areas with certain tools. They'll now be able to use them anywhere they want. So it's a more comfortable haircut. We saw this in cosmetology. When we took the state board haircut away, it was very interesting because a lot of them were really getting tangled up in where we told them to use tools. And so we took that away and said use them anywhere. Now we have a higher percentage of candidates that finish their haircuts because they're doing a more natural haircut. So that's why we transitioned to barber this way. You know, why should we tell you where to use the tool? You got to use the tool. You got to use the method. It doesn't matter where you do it. You have to use it as a logistical and functional part of the haircut. That's all. Okay? Then we're going to shave the neck. So let's go through it. Haircutting supplies are labeled in English. Like I said, if I forgot my spray bottle and now I decide to take it out, that's where it's going to be graded. If I don't pull anything out during the haircut, that's just going to be a yes, isn't it? Because I didn't have any labels to evaluate. Which brings up a good point. The way we train these examiners is they have to see something happen wrong in order to mark it wrong. I can't just ever assume if a comb's dropped, I have to see the comb be dropped. We teach them very, very common practice. All right? So we always get this, the examiner didn't like me. Well, we can go back and watch the video and see exactly what happened. We can't tell you exactly what happened, but we can tell you that examiner, that probably wasn't the point. Because what I train the examiner, you know, I always tell them, I say, you know, some people walk in my shop and immediately I look at them, I don't like them. I've never met the person before, I don't know why I don't like them. You know, later on down the road I may end up liking them, but initially I just didn't like that person that walked in the door. And that happens to us, doesn't it? And so what I tell them is only grade from the elbows down. That's all we care about. What's happening with these hands? Because that's what's going to cause all the problems. That's where the talent lies, correct? So let's look at the hands, okay? So understand that as well. But we want to make sure those implements and supplies are clean. So those clippers, combs, guards, or detachable blades, whatever you choose them to bring, are clean. Bring them clean and disinfected, okay? They need to perform a scalp analysis. Now, I really like this part of it. It's new. Currently, they don't perform a scalp analysis, but I know you're teaching them. So have them start doing it now, okay, as part of their evaluation. Then you won't have to transition this portion of it because they're doing it anyway. But they do need to look at the scalp, make sure there's no lesions and so forth that they're going to have an issue with. Of course, mannequins usually don't have a lot of problems with their scalp, but we do want them to look at it, okay? So they perform the scalp analysis. Now, it says demonstrate safe use of clippers and comb without guard or detachable blade. So clipper over comb, right? Then it says demonstrate safe use of clippers with guard or detachable blade. Then it says demonstrate safe use of comb and shears. So you have two task lines that deal with the clippers. One clipper over comb, one clipper with guard or detachable blade. Then you have another task line that says they have to use shears. We told them they had to use two methods of shears, didn't we? Finger and shear cutting, and shear over comb. So there's 4 methods they're evaluated on. They can use these anywhere on the head. So let's talk about them. First of all, the way I would probably do this haircut is I would probably bring in the mannequin with a little bit longer hair. And I would reduce the hair with a guard or detachable blade. I'd reduce the bulk. I've satisfied my clipper with guard or detachable blade, haven't I? That's a functional part of a haircut. If you were going to cut me into that haircut, you would want to take the bulk out first, wouldn't you? So that works. Then maybe I'm going to use my clipper over comb portion to taper the sides and the back. That's pretty natural, isn't it? And then maybe my finger and shears, you know, or my clipper over comb, or my shear over comb in different areas. I could use my shear over comb here, couldn't I, to outline. That's a possibility. I'm just giving you some possibilities and showing you they can do this stuff anywhere they want, but they have to be doing part of the haircut. I can't just pick up shears and chop, chop, chop and set them down and expect that to satisfy the examiner. I have to be actually cutting hair ½ inch at a time, don't I? Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions about just this hair cutting portion? We haven't got the shave yet, but just the hair cutting. It's the same haircut, right? It's just done a little differently and evaluated a little differently. Do they have to use comb when they pick up hair? When they're finger and hair cutting, you know, most barbers don't use a comb when they use their fingers, do they? They just simply bring the fingers through the hair and cut. They can do it that way. They don't have to use a comb in the finger and shear section, but they have to use a comb for the shear over comb section, correct? They have to hold their tools while they're working. They can set them down when they're finished and pick them back up and use them again, but while they're subsectioning or working with the hair, they have to be holding their tools. Okay, yes?
My question on the hair cutting section is that, it looks like now we have to use a straight edge razor for the neckline.
Yeah.
And can that be simulated with a razor as well?
I'm going to go over that in just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay? So just the actual haircut. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yes, sir.
After completing the haircut, are they allowed to wrap the clipper and put it off to the side, or do they have to throw it in the
Great
back?
question. What do I do with the clippers when I'm finished with them? I would set them down right at this point. Don't worry about them. Just set them down on your station and get into your shave portion. Okay? So don't clean anything up is what I'm getting at. We're going to clean that up in a minute. Let's not worry about it. Let's just let them focus on that haircut and just set things down on the station as they go. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
A gentleman's haircut, tapered haircut,
Yes, ma'am.
not a comb over or anything else.
It has to
Nice
satisfy
gentleman's
those
haircut.
qualifications.
Okay.
I wouldn't really say, I don't know what's considered a gentleman's haircut, but it just has to be a tapered haircut, and those 4 methods have to be used. So I have to start a clipper at 0 on the neck or 0 on the sides. I have to leave a sideburn. You're going to see that in a minute, but I have to leave a sideburn, but I can taper the sides and no block line. All right, I have to take that line out. Yes, sir.
So just to get a sure understanding, because you said you have a bag for client 1, client 2, well, will we redrape, use a totally different drape, or can we use the same drape for the haircut portion and the shave portion?
We'll go over that in a second. And I know the second client's new, and so it's a little confusing right now, but just, if you can just pull your focus just to the haircut on one client, and then I'll go through the transition in just a second. It's a lot different than the one is now. So I'm getting a lot of the same questions we get everywhere, because it's different. So now what do we have to do? We've finished the haircut. We've done all 4 of the methods. We've got our haircut complete. Now we're going to shave the neck, right? So the task line says, shave sides of neck using straight razor to include the reverse backhand. So what do I have to do? I have to adjust my draping, don't I? I have to drop it from the neck down onto the clamp, because I have to shave the neck, correct? So I have to expose the neck. I have to put a towel in, don't I? I have to transition from the neck strip, or if I've already used the towel for the haircut, I can simply use the same towel. But if I've used the neck strip for the haircut, I have to take that neck strip off and get rid of it. Then I have to drape with a towel for the shave. The shave has to have a cloth towel. Okay? Just 1 second. So once I've dropped my draping down to the clamp or down onto the tripod, and I've used my towel, now I go into my shaving. I'm going to disperse the shaving cream. Don't wipe the tips of the shaving cream. Okay? If I'm using a pump gel, don't wipe that tip off. That's one of the worst habits barbers have, with their shaving cream machines, is wiping the tips off. But just make sure they're dispersing it in their hand. If they're using a paste, they're using a spatula, they're not double dipping the spatula. I'm actually going to show you the shave, and you can kind of see some of these things, but they have to use that shaving cream as if it's going to be used all day long on everybody. Okay, infection control procedures. Do I have to have actual shaving cream? No. I could send him with a jar of cholesterol. Everybody says, what do I use? Anything you want to use. Toothpaste, if you want to use it. Okay? But I have to disperse it as if it's going to be used on everybody all day. Okay? I'm going to shave the back of the neck utilizing at some point that reverse backhand stroke, correct? So if you teach them to do that one first, that's fine. If you teach them to do that one last, that's fine as well. They just have to do that reverse backhand on the back of the neck. Then they can use the free hand to do the rest of the neck. Or reverse, however you teach them to do it, but they have to use that reverse backhand. Okay? So They adjust the draping down, they use a towel at this point if they're using a neck strip. If they've used a towel in the neck, they can simply drop that towel and draping down and do the shave, if you're getting my drift here. It's much easier, much more logistical just to use a towel for the haircut and drop it down. But if you teach neck strips, make sure you're teaching them not to tie them. You're teaching them to wrap the neck strips. We're seeing a lot of tied neck strips now. That draping cannot touch the skin of the neck. Okay? So I know that's a traditional barber technique to tie the neck strip, but we don't allow that. So we're going to drop that draping down. We're going to disperse our shaving cream. Of course, circular motions with cushions of fingers, blah, 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 not getting it in the ears and all over the place. I'm maintaining the product. I'm using that reverse backhand stroke and then finishing with whatever strokes you teach them to use. But they have to demonstrate the reverse backhand. Any questions about the shaving portion? Yes, ma'am. Hold on one second.
I just had a question about the towels. Will they have terry towels, barber towels? Because they're going to ask that. Because we teach in the shave.
Anything but paper.
Anything but paper.
Now, if you've caught the way that we do a shave, how do we take off the shaving cream?
With a
steam towel.
Steam towel, yeah.
So they're going to need a steam towel for the haircut, aren't they? And when you pack the steam towel, you can pack it in a separate bag. Of course, it doesn't have to be labeled, does it? Make sure this towel is wet, damp. They're bringing dry towels, so make sure the towel's damp. Okay? And you can pre-dampen it, put it in a bag, and have them bring it in. It doesn't have to say hot towel cabbie on it. This is a towel, all right? They simply unzip this bag, pull the towel out. Of course, they would remove any excess water once taking it out of the cabbie. They would test it on their wrist, and then they would wrap it, including the upper lip, ends over the forehead.
Two questions you brought up. One right now. When you just said wring the towel out, where would they be wringing that? Where would that excess water go?
You know, we really don't evaluate water coming out of the towel. It just has to be damp. But if the water does come out of the towel, they can simply wring it right over their work area. Over the trash can would be a good place. Just can't get it on the floor.
And then I wanted to go back to my previous question was, for that neck shave, can that razor be simulated, or does it need to be a razor
Okay,
inside?
good question. What type of razor can I use? I suggest you go and you buy these. These are depilatory razors. Some of you know what these are, right? You put the depilatory on the face. This is what you take it off with. It's a plastic razor. They can use these. Okay? And you can buy these at the store. You can buy them off online. Okay? Those are good ones to use. They will need 2 razors. They will need 2 razors. So, yes. So the first client bag will have shears, combs, it'll have their clippers, their guards, their detachable blades, whatever you send them with. It's going to have a steam towel, it's going to have the shaving cream, and it's going to have a razor. It's going to have a lot of stuff in it. Okay? So everything they need in one bag, dump it out. They drape for the haircut, they drop that drape down for the shave. They have to include a cloth towel. Then they have to use a steam towel to remove that. They have to use the steam towel properly. Of course, it doesn't need to sit on, does it? It's just a steam towel to go on the neck and wipe free the shaving cream. And then once they finish, they just step back. Of course, the towel, where does it go? Soil linens, correct? Just leave the draping where it is, step back, and they're finished. Yes, sir.
Being the fact that it's a neck shave, is astringent needed for the haircut? Since you're using a razor?
You would need to use some type of a post product, yes. Astringent, toner, bracer, whatever you want to call it. They would need to apply some type of an antiseptic.
So would it be in the bag as well, too?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, that would be in your universal supply bag because you're going to need that for the shave as well. Now, what I would do, now that you bring that up, what I like to do is get these little bottles. You get them free when you spend a night at the hotel, right? You can empty those out and put water in them and put toner. It can be water. It can be simulated. And, you know, that's a good way to do it. But then we'll need, you know, if you're using a toner astringent, they need a cotton round to apply, that sort of thing. If they're just using a bracer, of course, they could disperse it straight onto their hands and however you teach them to do it. Over here.
When you clean up with the astringent, it's universal, you just said, so it's shave for the neck, shave for the face, and then you'll have it again for the facial. So would that bottle then be placed back somewhere on the station, or would that bottle at cleanup be placed into items to be disinfected?
That's a great question, and I'm not going to go into the logistics of everything you talked about. What I'm going to say is that astringent is a universal supply. It should stay on your station all day long. You should have only brought one in the universal supply bag, and I'll teach you how to transition it to the rest of the clients. But anything that is on your, think about your own barbershop and what's sitting on your station all day. That stuff stays out on your station all day. Your disinfectant, your hand sanitizer definitely stay out all day long, don't they? If I drop something, I need that disinfectant and then hand sanitizer. My toner or astringent or bracer sits on my station all day long. You know, I have some gloves maybe on my station, and I would definitely have them bring a bag of gloves. This is a very small bag that I showed you, but I would bring a little bigger bag of gloves, because if they cut themselves, what did I say they had to do? Take care of it, right? So I have to do a blood exposure procedure, and part of my blood exposure procedure is to end up with a glove or finger caught, depending on what I'm going to use over that bandage, correct? So when we get to blood exposure procedure, we'll go over that. But if I cut myself, I've got gloves out on the station. They can be in a plastic bag because I can disinfect a plastic bag, can't I? My spatulas, if I'm using spatulas, are going to be out on the station in a bag. Anytime I go into these bags, I have to sanitize first, don't I? Because these are universal supply bags. You can use little plastic boxes. You can get creative if you want. This is just the way I would suggest you do it, okay? Combs. I can set all the combs I want out on the station, but in a minute I'm going to have to get rid of them all, unless they're in some type of a closed container, correct? If they're in a closed container on the station, I can disinfect that container and move it over to a clean side and use it for the next client, just like I can with all this stuff. So universal supplies are things I'm going to clean off and move over and use on the next client. Then I have my disposable supplies as well. My draping has to come off at a certain point, so I'm going to need more draping. If my draping falls off, I have to replace it, don't I? My draping hits the floor, it has to be replaced. So let's say I go to adjust for the shave, and I drop my drape on the floor. The towel stays around the neck, but the drape falls on the floor. I would need to pick that drape up, put it in my soil linens, sanitize my hands, get a clean drape out of my kit, and replace that draping with a clean drape. Once that draping's been replaced, then I can proceed. If during the haircut, my draping falls down onto the clamp, I need to stop and reposition that draping back up on the neck again. Or in the shave, if it falls way down on my tripod, I'm going to have to reposition that to make it look like it's just on the shoulders, okay? And the tripods are much easier to work with, so that's good. If my whole head pops off on the floor, I'm going to call 911. Okay? If that whole head pops off and everything falls on the floor, just take a big deep breath, pick it up, put their head back on their shoulders, adjust the draping, sanitize your hands, and go back to work. In that one case, that's not a natural thing to happen, I hope. If your clients are losing their head in your barbershop, you're in trouble. But if it's not a natural thing, just fix it and go on. But if that draping falls off that head, while it's still in position on that mannequin stand, they have to replace it. Yes, ma'am.
So the only thing I really can picture happening is when you are redraping for that shave on the neck on tripods, those drapes are going to fall down.
They're going to fall down onto the tripod portion of it.
Right.
They can tighten it around that tripod portion as long as that towel's intact.
So you're okay if they like have to tie
Yes.
the
It doesn't
the
have to be
corners or
loose,
something like that?
anything
Okay.
like that. They can go ahead and Velcro it back or snap
Okay.
it back or however it's positioned.
Right.
Just so it stays. Don't tape it. Don't pin it. You know, just make sure it's down where they can shave the neck. The examiner is going to come over to each candidate. May I please use your comb to check your haircut? Have them hand them a comb. The examiners can't pick things up off their station. They think it's a trick. It's not a trick. When we hand things back, they think it's a trick. It's not a trick. Take it back. okay? We just need this to check the haircut. So hand them the comb. They are going to check the same things. Is the front of the uniform in length, sideburns. Right now, it's the same check, isn't it? They have to have sideburns now. If you shave that side clean, they're not going to get credit for that. They have to have a haircut blended without a weight line, and they have to take at least a ½ inch off during the haircut. So it's the exact same haircut check. Please clean up your hair at this time. Upon completion, do nothing until the next verbal instructions are read. There's brooms and dustpans on site. I would highly recommend you use those. The thing I see is you send the little brooms and dustpans with them, they sweep up and they stick them right back in their kit, and then they have an infection control issue. So it's just easier to use the ones that are on site for them to remember, and then empty them out into your trash and move them past to the next person or put them up against the wall again. Okay? But there will be brooms and dustpans on site. What we evaluate is that they remove the hair from the work area. What was the work area? That's the tables, isn't it? The work surfaces. That stool, the floor. We're also evaluating the skin and drape. They tell them, do not remove that drape. In their cleanup, if they want to take it off and shake it and reapply it, that's fine. But there has to be draping applied when the examiner comes back around to check that, because we are evaluating if there's any hair left on the drape. Okay? So make sure that they do that. Make sure that they maintain that drape throughout the section. If it does fall off, they replace it. Again, if the head falls off, don't worry about it, but if it falls off, the mannequin stand. And then as they get through with things, you know, if I drop a comb, I'm going to pick it up, put it in my disinfected items to be disinfected, sanitize my hands, get a clean comb. So that last task line is all about where I'm putting things, isn't it? When I sweep up my hair, I dump it in my trash before I pass that on to the next person. Okay? So that's all about where I put stuff. If I wrap something in a towel, let's say I take my clippers at this point, and I wrap them in a towel, and I drop them in my items to be disinfected, I would be marked off on this task because the towel does not belong in the items to be disinfected. It's all about every single item that goes in that bag. That's all that task line's about. What is the process? Well, I can't put a towel in there because that's laundry, correct? Or my soiled linen. So everything that goes in those bags literally has to have those processes done to them. All right? Question? Now is when it gets a little different, and I've had a lot of questions about this, and I know it is different, but we want to make sure that the candidates can transition their stations for a new client. So we watched an initial setup. Now we're going to watch them transition to a second setup. This setup will be a client for the shave, correct? You'll break down your work area and dispose of supplies. Just as I said, we're going to tell them when to clean this stuff up. This is where we're telling them to clean up from the haircut client and move on to your shave client. You're going to remove anything that you're not going to use anymore. I'm not going to be using my clippers anymore. I'm going to go ahead, take those dirty clippers, and put the cord, everything into that to be disinfected bag. The trimmers can go away, can't they? Unless I'm going to use them in the shave somehow. I don't know why I would do that, but put them in the bag. Combs, shears, all those things can go inside that disinfected bag, can't they? Because that's what's going to happen to them. Towels and draping into my soiled linen bag. And any trash left on the station into the trash. I would dispose of trash as I go. If anything's chemically saturated, it cannot be set back on a station. Chemically saturated meaning toner would be a chemical, correct? So anything that has a chemical on it cannot be set back down. A neck strip, if the draping fell off, I could take the neck strip off and set it on the counter because I can't contaminate the client with their own stuff, right? And that counter belongs to them. So combs, clippers, neck strips, things that are dry with no chemical on them can be set back down and picked back up, okay, and so forth. So I'm going to get rid of all that stuff that was on that station that I don't need anymore. Of course, like we said, I'm probably going to need that toner, bracer, astringent again for the shave, aren't I? So I'm going to move that off to one side. I'm going to need my disinfectant. I'm going to move that off to one side. I'm going to need my hand sanitizer. So everything I'm going to use for the next one, I'm sliding it all to one side of the station. Once everything's cleaned up off that side or moved over, I'm going to pull out my disinfectant, however means of disinfection, let's say my wipe in this case. I shut the container, and I'm going to disinfect that side of the station. Then I'm going to begin to pick up the universal supplies and wipe them down with disinfectant and move them over to the clean side of the station. Okay? Then I'm going to sanitize my hands and I'm going to get out my client 2 bag. So the transition of the station, what I'm getting at, is taking those universal supplies, isolating them onto one side, disinfecting one side of the station, wiping those supplies off, moving them over. Once that side is cleared off, I'm going to disinfect the other side of the station. Then I have a completely clean station that's everything on that station's been disinfected. Then I can sanitize my hands and start setting up my shaving supply. Okay? Because that's what we ask them to do. Prepare the work area for a new client. Set up the universal supplies you use for the remainder of the examination. Anything else you might want to use here, you're going to set it out. You're also going to set up the shaving with a straight razor section. You'll prepare the client for the shave. That's draping, correct? The draping has to be clean, new draping for the shave. You have 15 minutes. You'll be told you have 8 minutes. Don't demonstrate anything until we ask you to do it. We're going to repeat that, and off they go. Okay? So we've taken, our haircutting client has walked out the door. Our shaving client looks a lot like them. You can use the same mannequin, okay? But that client we're visualizing has walked out the door. So I'm going to clean up all that client's stuff. And I'm going to get rid of it. My universal supplies, I'm going to slide to one side. I'm going to wipe off half the station and the tables and the stools with my disinfectant. Then I'm going to wipe off those universal supplies and move them to the disinfected side. Then I'm going to disinfect whatever is left dirty. I'm going to disinfect that. Now I have a complete station that's all been disinfected. The table, the stool, and the counter, all the universal supplies, these baggies, I can wipe them off with disinfectant and move them to a clean side. You know, I can wipe off my hand sanitizer, I can move it over. My disinfectant bottle, I can move it over. My first aid kit, which is a universal supply, I can wipe it off and move it over. Anything else that I might have that I'm going to be using all day just gets moved over to the disinfected side. And then I disinfect the dirty side of the table. I now have a completely disinfected station. Does that make sense? I have a question. Several.
Several.
And this is new. I expect you to ask questions. It's different.
I was just making sure that, you said we're going to swap out the cape. I thought you said earlier just to, if you use the Sanic strip or neck strip to remove it and put a towel on for the shave, but you can use the same cape again.
Not for the next client. You
Okay.
have to have a clean drape for the next client.
Okay, so when you said drop the drape, what was that about?
That was taking it off the neck from the haircut and dropping it down to shave the neck.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you on that.
So if my disinfectant is wipes, would you suggest that I use one wipe to clean the, from going to client, using one wipe to clean the hair where I've just removed all of the old supplies, then I'll use another wipe to clean off all of the general supplies, then use another wipe to clean off the rest of it, or can I use one wipe for all?
As long as that wipe stays damp, you can use it for all of them. Just proper disinfection technique.
Can you still use the clip to hold the towel or the drape on?
You can use a clip to hold the drape, a barber clip. The thing I see is they put that barber clip in their pocket and use it on the next person. Those barber clips have to go into the disinfected bag and a new barber clip come out. Okay.
So as the candidate is disinfecting the station where the binder is that has the language, that has to be lifted and disinfected under that also?
I believe the portion where the binder is, I would do it.
Okay. And one more question about,
That would be what I would say. I would do it.
okay. The language that's in the binders, the CIB, is it abridged or is it just as it is here?
The language, you have an English CIB.
Right, but
So-
is
so
every,
everything would be taken right off that CIB and put in that binder. If it's in a foreign language, it's off that translated CIB and put straight into the binder. So it's, yes, it's the same, exact same.
Just, when you said neck shave, you meant the neck shave around the ear and behind the neck, right? Not here.
They don't have to shave over the ear or
They
behind
don't
the ear,
have
they
to?
just have to shave the neck portion. So
The
where they've
back part?
tapered,
Yeah?
Yeah, they just need to shave that portion, demonstrate the reverse
But you're not
back.
doing this.
They're not doing, they'll
Because you
do,
went like this, but.
they'll do this in the neck
it-
shave.
Yeah, no, in the
In the-
face
in
shape.
the face shape, sorry.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Just-
Sorry.
Okay, no, I just wanna make sure.
Man, I'm driving everybody crazy, aren't I? Yeah, it's okay, yeah. And the reason we're waiting for the microphone is, you know, this is being also telecast, so we want to make sure they hear the questions as well.
So you said that they can use the same mannequin, so for the haircut and the shave,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
the mannequin would just remain on the tripod?
Yes, ma'am. They
Okay.
don't need to remove the mannequin.
Okay.
They may move that tripod around to sweep the hair. I would recommend that to get the hair up. But when in the transition itself, the draping has to go away, but the mannequin head can remain. And don't disinfect the mannequin, please. My clients get really upset when I do that. There's a few of them I'd really like to disinfect, though. Okay, great. So let's go through those steps one more time. I'm going to come over here, right? I'm going to take away anything that's a universal supply, and I'm going to set it off to one side, just for example, okay? Then I'm going to take my wipe, aren't I, or my towel and my spray, and I'm going to disinfect one side of the table and clean it completely. Then I'm going to start wiping things off, and I'm going to start moving them to that clean side, okay? And once everything, all my universal supplies are on the clean side, then I can disinfect this contaminated side, and that whole surface is clean. Does that help? Okay, good, good. So it's just a basic transition of a station, okay? So when we were talking about our haircut, we were using our shears safely, weren't we? Tips were closed, we're palming, right, while we're subsectioning. We're using our clipper guards and our clippers safely. We're not gouging the head. We're turning them away. Our razors, we're closing when we're setting them down. We're always following those safety procedures, aren't we? And so as I'm putting them away, make sure, if I decide to put my shears back in the case, for instance, if I brought a disinfectable case, because I don't want to drop these $1,000 shears straight into a bag. I mean, let's be sensible. I don't want to do that. So what I'd like to do maybe is put them back in this disinfectable case. In order to do that, I have to wipe these off first, don't I? I would need to disinfect these shears before I return them to the case. Does that make sense? And then I can put the whole case into my items to be disinfected. That way they don't have to ruin their shears. And I know a lot of these shears are very expensive, so we don't want them to have to do that. Other questions? Good, good, good. Okay, so we move on to the shave. The shave is a lot the same. Shaving a face is shaving a face. But what we found out is there's a whole lot of ways to drape and there's a whole lot of ways to shave. Like I said, there's anything from a 14-stroke I've seen to a 31-stroke spa shave. Crazy stuff out there. So, do we want to evaluate that? Absolutely not. We want to evaluate safety with the razor, don't we? Okay, so let's look at this. You'll prepare to perform shaving with the straight razor. You'll prepare the model's face by lathering and steaming. In the current examination, this is exactly the same. And I'm going to talk to you about that because there's a really good way to do this, okay? You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, infection control. You'll have 5 minutes. Be told we have 2 minutes. Don't demonstrate any procedure. So now this portion is timed. Currently, it's untimed. As of September, this section will only get 5 minutes. But all we ask them to do is lather and steam. What we're seeing them do now is a shave steam. Don't do that. Even currently, all they have to do is lather and steam. If they start to use more towels, they're going to get evaluated more times, aren't they? It says you have to use 1 lather and 1 steam. We're not evaluating a shave. So get that out of your mind now, okay? It's very important that you've already taught them how to do a shave. We expect them to go out and do exactly what you taught them, don't we? What we're asking here, lather the face and steam the face. 1 time. Do that in your current examinations. Transition it now. They should only be doing it once. Okay? So pull your head out of the whole service thing. It's really difficult, believe me. I'm an old schooler. I did all the services. I know what I'm talking about when they talk about the service. This is not a service, it's lather and steam. Does that make sense? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take that mannequin head, as it says here, my shaving supplies are labeled in English. I already have my shaving cream out because it was a universal supply, wasn't it? I wiped it off and moved it over. I set up implements that are clean. I had to get out a clean razor, didn't I? So now I have my second razor out. And like I said, you can use the plastic ones. You don't have to have a blade in them. The plastic ones were good because they don't chatter. And if you put a credit card in here, they don't chatter. You know, just cut off a room key or a piece of plastic and put in there. But they're going to need two razors because that first razor had to go away with the first client. Now I have a disinfected razor to use for my shave. Okay? So I have to have two razors. One in my client one bag, one in my client two bag. So, lathers beard and mustache area. That's all we're telling him to do, and apply a steam towel. So currently you can do it the same way, can't you? Because that's all it asks you to do. I'm going to lather the face using the cushions of my fingers safely. I'm not getting lather in the eyes. I'm not getting it up the nose. I'm not getting it in the ears, and I'm not getting it in their mouth. I'm lathering the mustache area, correct? Using fingers, not one finger, but several, or two at least. So I'm going to lather for the shave. Then I'm going to take out my steam towel, or one of my steam towels. I'm going to throw that bag away, or if there's more steam towels in it, I can zip it and put it back, can't I? I'm going to wring, or demonstrate wringing. Like I said, this towel needs to be damp, doesn't it? But it doesn't need to drip water out of it. Okay? Then I'm going to test the temperature on my wrist, correct? That's my next thing I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply it over the nostrils, up over the forehead, correct? And I'm going to leave it there. That just says apply a steam towel, doesn't it? Currently, that's what they're doing too. It's the same process. But just do it one time. Lather once, apply the steam towel, and step back. Okay? That's all they have to do. Currently, that's all they have to do. Hold on one second.
We talked about this being like a real life experience. Where are we disposing of the blade? Is it in items to is that trash, items to be disinfected? You know, normally I would have a sharps container.
First off, they don't need a blade.
Right.
Second off, we don't evaluate it because they can't transport a sharps container legally. So we never evaluate them taking that razor blade out. Okay? So once they did, that's a good question because the haircut, they had a blade, didn't they? Supposedly, even though it's simulated, we expect that it was a blade or think of it as a blade. Just fold it up and put it to be disinfected. We don't evaluate the removal of the blade, and we don't evaluate the disposal of the blade.
So if they had two blades, they could just. If they had two blades, they can just throw the whole blade into the items to be disinfected. The whole, and then for the haircut, if they had a blade, if that was in client one bag, once they finish doing that, they can put that in the items to be disinfected. For client two, once finished with the shave, they can just put that whole razor in the items to be disinfected.
Yes, sir. The whole razor can just go in there. But they have to have separate razors from client one to client two. Any other questions before we get started here? Okay, so we ask you to lather and steam. That's all we ask you to do. Currently, just do that. It's taken like 20 minutes, and all you have to do is lather and steam. All right? And it says to apply a steam towel. It never said to remove it, did it? Follow instructions. Apply it. Step back. So you're just going to leave that steam towel on the face like you currently do. Same process, it's just time. Once everyone's stepped back, we're going to move on. You'll perform straight shaving with a straight razor. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You'll be instructed individually by the examiner when to remove the towel, relather, and begin the shave. This is an untimed section. Do not remove the steam towel or demonstrate any strokes until instructed to do so, right? So we left it on the face. We've stepped back. We're not watching anybody. We're looking at the floor or anything. Just don't watch around the room. The examiner will come up to each candidate individually and ask them to please remove the steam towel, relather, and demonstrate the first 5 shaving strokes. Same thing, right? So far, nothing's changed but the timing in the first section. They're going to remove the steam towel and lather. Of course, that's one continuous motion, isn't it? We don't continually wipe. We're just wiping that shaving cream off, that initial shaving cream. Now we're going to relather that beard and mustache area. And we're going to start with stroke number 1, aren't we? So stroke number 1. I'm going to do the stroke number 2, stroke number 3, stroke number 4, then I'm going to reposition and stroke number 5. I'm going to fold my razor, set it down, and step back. That's simple. That's what they're doing now, correct? Same thing. It looks different though, doesn't it? Because in the current CIB, it's saying, you know, how they position their hands, and it tells them how to do it. It doesn't do that anymore. It says, demonstrate freehand stroke in areas 1, 3, and 4. That's evaluating the stretching hand. That's evaluating the leading point of the razor. All the stuff that you're seeing in the CIB now is still evaluated. The only difference is there's 2 task lines for each stroke now, isn't there? You see the position of the stroke, and then in the further evaluation, we look at the stretching hand and so forth. We're looking at stretching hand here now. So we only look at the first 5 strokes. That's all we're ever going to look at. They're never going to complete a shave here. Currently, they complete the shave. In the first 5 strokes, currently, we watch the placement of the stroke and the hand position of the razor. Then in the completion of the shave, we evaluate the stretching hand, we evaluate the leading point of the razor, and we evaluate, what's the other one we evaluate? I don't have it up here, but we evaluate 3 things in the continuation of the strokes. Right now, we're only looking at 5 strokes, and we're looking at all those things in the strokes at the same time. Okay? So just have them do stroke 1, stroke 2, stroke 3, stroke 4, and then stroke 5. Set the razor down, they're finished. Okay? Please do nothing until the next verbal instructions are given. The examiner will go around the room and evaluate all the candidates in the room. Then they're going to say, do not demonstrate any additional shaving strokes. They're finished with that razor. We've seen everything we need to see. We saw a reverse backhand, didn't we? We've now seen a reverse freehand. We've seen a backhand. We've seen all 4 strokes. We don't need to see it anymore. They can do it once. They can do it 10 times. So, don't demonstrate anything else. Just perform the finishing steps. What are the finishing steps? Apply a steam towel and a bracer. That's the finishing steps. So now imagine if you're using a live model, just to visualize this, that model is going to walk out with half their face shaved, aren't they? Okay? Because we're only evaluating those strokes on the one side of the face. If I have a left-handed shaver, can they shave left-handed? Absolutely. Okay, whatever's more comfortable for them, it's still the same strokes, isn't it? So, we ask them to do the first 5 shaving strokes. They complete the shaving service, which means they use another steam towel, don't they? Get that shaving cream all the way off this time. They've used the steam towel properly by wringing it, right? Wringing it. Testing the temperature on the wrist and applying it to the face and safely taking off that shaving cream. Then I'm going to apply a toner or astringent or bracer, correct? And I'm done. Pretty awesome, huh? I have to maintain the drape. It doesn't say anything about how to put a drape on, does it? Thank you. It doesn't say anything about it. The drape just has to be loose, somewhat like the haircut drape, right? Open in the front this time because we're shaving the front of the neck. But just make sure that they apply it to the clamp rather than to the neck of the mannequin. They can put it down onto the clamp or the metal tripod because they need to shave that neck in stroke 5, don't they? There's no evaluation done other than the towel has to be between the skin or the clamp and the drape, doesn't it? I always have to have a towel between the skin and the drape. Okay? And then everything as I use it goes into the right containers. Yes, sir.
So you said after the 5th stroke, they're only evaluated on what?
They're only evaluated on the first 5 strokes in the shave.
After that, you're watching, what are they watching after the 5th one?
They're watching, currently, in the current exam, you complete the shave.
Yeah.
And they're watching the stretching hand, they're watching the leading point, and they're watching the angle of the razor.
Okay.
Those are the 3 things they watch in those 6 through whatever.
14, yeah.
Okay? So the evaluation in the first 5 strokes is different than the evaluation in completing the shave.
Okay.
In this examination, when I do stroke 1, they're also evaluating the stretching hand at the same time, the leading point of the razor, and the razor angle as they perform stroke 1.
Okay.
Then as they flip to 2, it's the same evaluation. So the placement, the angle, all that stuff is evaluated in one task rather than 2 different times.
Okay, so when they finish 14 or however many it is for whatever state, then they're just doing the towel and the stringent. That's what completion means.
In the current exam.
Okay, in the current
In the
exam.
future exam, they're only ever going to do 5 strokes.
Okay, that's what,
That's
okay.
it. Yeah.
All right, gotcha.
And then we're going to tell them, don't do any more. I'm going to actually show you this shave, okay, a video, so you can see it. What we do, how we train our examiners, is we have seasoned people come in and perform these tasks, and we have them make mistakes. Well, the examiners watch these videos, and they score them, and that's part of their evaluation process. So I'm going to show you one of these. So there's mistakes in it. We can talk about it as it's going through. I'll tell you what the mistakes are. But you'll actually see how that progresses and how the instructions are read and what happens. Yes, ma'am.
Can the candidate still place an extra towel on the table for clearing the product from the blade?
Absolutely. They can use a Whoopee, wiping towel, whatever you want to call it. They place it on the table or the station, however, where they're comfortable placing it, and it just sits there and they can actually wipe that shaving cream or simulated shaving cream off, yes. We don't evaluate hair removal. That went away. Okay, while we're evaluating a safe use of a razor. Okay? Once everybody's stepped back, we move on. But I want to show you this video, and we'll talk about it as we go through. This is on a live model, so it's not actually what your examiners will watch. They'll watch one done on a mannequin. But I wanted to show you this because it kind of makes the shave make sense. All right?
You will prepare to perform shaving with a straight razor. You will prepare the model's face by lathering and steaming. Do not remove the steam towel until instructed to do so by the examiner. You will be expected to follow all client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You will have 5 minutes to complete this section. You will be informed when you have 2 minutes remaining. Do not demonstrate any procedures until the verbal instructions are given, and you are
Okay, so you see
instructed to
spatulas in the bag, right?
step back
You see
to indicate
the sanitizer, you see the bracer, or the aftershave lotion, you see the first aid kit, and you see the disinfectant are all out, aren't they? I haven't put anything back in my kit. They're reading the instructions twice, aren't they? There's my bags on the floor that are labeled. So the station looks good, his draping looks good. Like I said, this is a live model situation, you'll have the mannequin, right?
Until the verbal instructions have been given, and you are instructed to begin. Step back to indicate you have finished.
This is also in a simulated environment where you have an actual environment. But he's using a table. He sanitizes his hands first, absolutely. So he's off to a good start. He's got his shaving cream. Looks like a paste. He's getting his spatulas out. But he just contaminated them, didn't he? Because he's already touched the shaving cream. He can't go in that bag. He left the bag open. I don't know why he does this, but every time I watch the video, he double dips. I think he'd learned by now. Okay? He wiped it on his hand. He went back to the shaving cream. That's double dipping. He's contaminated that shaving cream, hasn't he? So he would have had an infection control issue in the disbursement of the shaving cream. He's now lathering. Oh, this went into the sticks again, didn't he? Contaminated him again. He wants more shaving cream and he double dips again. So I call him a serial double dipper. All right? And he's going to apply a little more shaving cream. But he's had some real issues already. He's failed his application of shaving cream, hasn't he? Because of how he's conducted himself. It's not all about the application. It's about how that candidate is performing it. So he's had 2 or 3 infection control problems. He's failed the application of the shaving cream. Now his steam towel. He never wrung the steam towel, did he? He tested it, but he never wrung the steam towel out. So you need to wring the steam towel, don't you? Wring it, test the temperature, and apply it. Okay? He also never covered the upper lip, did he? So that's an improper steam towel for a shave, because he has to apply it to everywhere he's shaving, correct?
All candidates have indicated they've completed this
He's left the
section of
towel on the face,
examination.
he stepped back.
Please do nothing until the next
All he
verbal
did was lather and
instruction.
steam, right? So he basically failed the whole first part of that test. Now we'll go on to the shaving
You will
portion.
perform shaving with a straight razor. You will be expected to follow all client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You will be instructed individually by the examiner when to remove the towel, relather, and begin the shave. This is an untimed section. Do not remove the steam towel or demonstrate any strokes until instructed individually by the examiner to do so. Instructions will be repeated. You will perform.
There's
shaving
another
with a
problem
straight
with the
razor.
station. Can anybody
You will
tell
be
me what that
expected
is?
to follow all client protection, safety, and
The
infection
shaving
control
control
procedures.
jar has been left open the whole time. That has to be closed when it's not in use, doesn't it? So he has another issue going on there
This is an
too.
untimed section. Do not remove the steam towel or demonstrate any strokes.
And we're going to zoom in on it and show you how really clean that looks. It's got a lot of stuff around the top was what I was trying to show. It's a dirty container.
Please remove the steam towel, relather, and demonstrate the first 5 shaving strokes.
What didn't happen there? He didn't take the lather off, did he? He just took the towel off. Now, I'm telling you, he's going to double dip again. He's serial double dipper, right? Huh? No. This is what the examiners watch, right? That's why I'm showing you the errors, because these are most common errors we see. And I'm going to show you how he could fail the whole shave because of just common errors. But he never took the shaving cream off, so he missed that first steam towel. Excuse me. Of course, stroke number 1, we're evaluating the stretching hand. We're evaluating the leading point of the razor, right? The angle of the stroke, the angle of the razor, where the stroke was placed. Here comes number 2. All those same things evaluated. Number 3, can I move the head? Absolutely. Move the head. He did point it away enough that he was okay. But yeah, they need to shut the razor. Stroke 3. And down into 4. And then 5. And of course, this is removing hair, right? I would expect on a mannequin that they just do 1 5-stroke and they're finished.
Please do nothing until the next verbal instructions are given.
Shaving cream's still open, isn't it? Bag of spatula is still open, isn't it?
All examiners have indicated they are ready to proceed. Do not demonstrate any additional strokes. You will perform the finishing steps of the service. You are expected to follow all client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You will have 5 minutes to complete this section. You will be informed when you have 2 minutes remaining. Step back to indicate you have finished. Instructions will be repeated. All examiners have indicated that they are ready to proceed. Do not demonstrate any additional strokes. You will perform the finishing steps of the service. You are expected to follow all client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You will have 5 minutes to complete this section. You will be informed when you have 2 minutes remaining. Step back to indicate you have finished. You may begin.
Again, he's going to use a steam towel. Again, he didn't wring it, did he? He's just testing the temperature. And he never applied it. He's just going to wipe the shaving cream off. Okay, so there's some errors there, isn't there? Because it says steam towels applied and removed. That's what the task line says you do. So he's going to wipe all that off. And he's going to put on the bracer. He didn't get all the shaving cream off either, did he? So now he's going to put on his aftershave product, whatever he's using. He went ahead and did that. So these are the typical mistakes that we see, and we're currently seeing in the exams here.
All candidates have indicated they have completed this section of the examination. We will now proceed.
So that's the shave. It goes that fast. And it should be going that fast now. Okay? So apply a steam towel. In the beginning, you're going to lather, right, and apply the steam towel. Then you're going to leave it on the face. Then the examiner is going to come over and ask you to demonstrate the first 5 shaving strokes. Currently, you're going to do the first 5 strokes, and then the examiner is going to stand there and say, complete the shave. You're going to complete the shortest shave you know. Okay? Because we're looking at the razor. We're not looking at the shave itself. Does that make sense? Okay? Then we're going to say, finish the service, which is get the shaving cream off, get your aftershave product on there, okay? And that sort of thing, right? So the new shave goes very quickly. The current shave should be going a lot quicker because the longer they take, the more they're being evaluated on. Are you following me? The more towels they use, the more times they're being evaluated on a steam towel. So in the current exam, let's say I steam first. Then I apply my shaving cream. Then I steam a second time. I've now been evaluated on 2 steam towels, so I better have used both of them correctly. Where I really only needed to apply 1 in the first place, my evaluation would have just been with 1 steam towel. Does that make sense? So don't complicate it for them. We're not demonstrating a shave, we're demonstrating safety and sanitation. All right? Questions on the shave? That video really helps, doesn't it? To kind of visualize how things really work. And I think it's a great addition to that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 10-minute break. It's currently about 12:35. Let's be back in 10 minutes. Okay, we're back. And there was some questions asked that I'd like to kind of reiterate because I want everybody to hear them. So this gentleman had a question.
It was in regards to the shave for the mannequin itself. Is it mandatory that they're clean with no facial hair for the male mannequin, or is it just female mannequins?
Okay, that's a great question because we don't evaluate hair removal, as I stated. And I'm really glad this gentleman asked this because one of the main things we need to remember is we're evaluating use of a razor safely. And so there's no hair removal evaluated. They could use that same cosmetology mannequin, the female mannequin, for the shave. If they did bring a mannequin with hair, it needs to be short enough that it's not going to inhibit their shaving strokes. But it's not necessary, and if it's not necessary, I probably wouldn't do it. But if they did happen to have to bring a mannequin with beard hair, make sure it's clipped down really short. Because I know some of them can't afford new mannequins.
That's
yeah.
exactly why too.
And so if they can't afford a new mannequin, just clip them down as short as you can get them, and then they just use that mannequin, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Great. Okay, so now we go into the blood exposure section, and this is a new section to this examination. It's actually incorporated in all of our other exams, so I'm really glad to see it here. Basically, the blood exposure, as I said, is use of a first aid kit in the sense that if I cut myself, and in this exam I've cut my own finger. It says you'll demonstrate blood exposure. You'll imagine the following scenario. During a service, you sustained a minor cut to your index finger. The injury is such that you can continue with the service. Your client or your work area has been contaminated. That's the key thing. Nothing is contaminated here. Everything's considered clean right now. You don't have to disinfect the shears or the clippers, whatever you cut yourself with. That mechanism isn't necessary. We're evaluating how you take care of it and not contaminate anything. So everything's clean right now, all right? We don't want to contaminate the clean stuff. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control. You'll have 10 minutes. We told them you have 5. We're going to repeat that, and you're going to go. If you teach cosmetology, you notice this is the exact same blood exposure procedure. Exactly. Okay? So in the cosmetology and barber, they've cut their index finger. First of all, they need to remember which index finger they cut, the right or the left one. They can't interchange them. All right? But blood exposure supplies are labeled in English. Now I'm actually looking at this labeling on this first aid kit, and it needs to say first aid kit. That's what it has to say on it, first aid kit. Okay? I need to remove the materials from the kit. This is where my gloves might come in handy, because I could cover that cut, sanitize those gloves, and then go into this kit, couldn't I? And then I could put that hand that I've cut inside the kit because I have a glove on. But I could also choose just to sanitize my hands and use one hand to get things out of this kit, correct? But I never can put this finger that I've cut, whichever one it is, inside of that first aid kit or an unsanitized hand. Okay? The things that I'm going to take out of my first aid kit is a secondary bag. Again, we don't label this, do we? It's just a bag. I like to use these half bags because they're small and they're easy to maintain on the station. I'm also going to take out a bandage and some type of an antiseptic, right? So those are the things that I'm actually going to be pulling out of this kit. Now, I stated that this first aid kit is used throughout the examination, correct? So I have several cuts worth of stuff in here. And I made this because I want you to know you can make one, but it has to have several of each in there. The other thing that I see in California is you don't separate things. Make sure all the bandages are single. You don't have them in a row. Because once I tear that off with that contaminated hand, it can't go back in the kit and it can't go back on the station, can it? Because now I have a contaminated item. These are contaminated. Okay? So separate everything inside there. All right, the first thing I get out is this secondary bag. I'll come over here where you can see me. I'm going to take this bag and I'm going to prop it open on the station so that I can start putting things into it. All right? The first step, if I've already cut myself, let's talk about that first. I already have a glove on because during the haircut I cut myself with my shears. Okay? I need to remove that glove and put it in that bag and operate just like I never cut myself. So, again, I've cut my index finger. I can't put this hand, even though it has a glove on it now. You're following this scenario? I've cut myself, I have a glove on. I can't just assume I can stick it right in there. That glove has to be taken off. So I still have to treat this like it's a cut hand. I could put another glove over the top of that, sanitize and go in with both hands, and then take both gloves off and put them in the bag. That would be one way of doing it. Okay? Or I can just go in with one hand, fish things out, close my first aid kit. Very important they close their first aid kit when they get the stuff out. Remove that glove from before and put it inside this bag. Everything that's blood contaminated has to go inside this bag. Okay? Then I'm going to tear open my alcohol wipe or whatever I'm using for my antiseptic. I'm putting those wrappers straight into that bag. Don't put down a paper towel and start setting things on a paper towel. That paper towel is what? Absorbent. It's going to contaminate a station. Don't set anything on top of the station. Set everything back inside that. That's what that second bag's for. I'm going to use that antiseptic on my finger. I'm going to put that inside that bag. I'm then going to pick up my bandage. Great, this emoji bandage. I didn't know I had these. I'm going to put that wrapper inside this bag. Now, if I touch this bag, I have to what? Sanitize, right? Any container, it says. I'm going to put this on. But the point I'm getting at is I'm putting everything inside this bag. I'm not setting anything on the station, right? Then I sanitize my hands. I'm going to go into my little bag of gloves here that's on my station. I'm going to go ahead and get a glove out. And this is the only time that I would sanitize my hands before I put a glove on. If I got more than one glove out, I can't put them back in there, can I? I've just got 2 gloves out, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this glove over the top. I'm going to zip this bag closed, and I'm going to throw it in my trash bag. And then I'm done. Okay? So I'm going to remove things from the first aid kit. I'm going to clean the injured area with an antiseptic. I'm going to cover it with dressing that's absorbent and secured. That would be my adhesive bandage, correct? Then I'm going to wear a glove or finger guard. I'm going to dispose of all contaminated supplies inside that bag as I go. Then I'm going to zip that bag shut, and I'm going to drop it in my trash bag because that's the second bag. It has to be double bagged. Once is the bag I put it in, second bag is the trash bag. Okay? Questions?
The gloves, can't the gloves already be in the first aid kit?
You can put the gloves in the first aid kit, but it poses a huge problem. First of all, how many of you have first aid kits with gloves in them that they use? Usually you have gloves on your station that you can use to contain it. So we want it to be a little more realistic. Putting gloves inside there reminds them they have to wear them. I would suggest you put them outside the first aid kit. Anything that's going to cue them on how to do something is going to be perceived as cheating, if you follow that, if it's not normal procedure. Yes, ma'am.
I think I missed something. When they're given the instruction to start the first aid, they're starting at the point, well, my finger is cut. The other hand is the working hand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sanitize that one hand, or?
I would sanitize both hands.
You can
Yeah.
look at it,
Just go ahead and
sanitize both hands.
Then just put
a
the one hand
glove.
inside there, yeah.
But would you put a glove on the injured hand while you're manipulating your first aid materials?
If you choose to put a glove on, put it on before you sanitize.
Okay.
So if I'm going to choose to wear a glove, okay, so my choice is to put a glove on first before I get in my first aid kit. That's the other reason the gloves are on the outside. You put that on first, then I'm going to sanitize my hand and the glove at the same time. Then both hands can go in.
Okay, one is gloved, one is not.
Correct.
Okay.
The injured one is gloved, and it's now sanitized, correct? So both hands can go in. If I choose not to wear a glove, I could sanitize both hands, but this is the only hand that can go inside the first aid kit. Okay? Yes, sir.
If you're bleeding, and I guess this procedure is not that you're leaking, so to speak, and so if you are bleeding, are you supposed to stop the blood first, or do you have to simulate that, or is it just a minor cut?
No, you can do it just exactly the way I said to do it. There's no simulation of stopping the bleeding. There's no disinfection of tools. You simply have blood present, and you're dealing with it. Which brings up another portion. I had someone in examination the other day, and they had a cut already. And while they were performing the haircut, the cut reopened. They didn't cut themselves, it reopened. And if they just ignore the blood, the supervisor will come in and make them do a blood exposure procedure, just so you know. Don't ignore it, just go ahead and do it. You didn't fail because you cut yourself, you failed because you ignored it, right? So this person said, well, wait a minute, I didn't cut myself. Well, there's blood present, you still need to take care of it, correct? So we got in an argument with this person, or the proctor did, not an argument, but a kind of a confrontation about the fact that they still had to take care of it because there's blood present. That's what we're talking about. So that's a great question. If there's any, we're just dealing with blood present, not dripping all over the place or anything like that. Just how do I deal with it if there's blood around? The main thing is I don't contaminate my station with that blood. I don't contaminate my first aid kit with that blood. And I prepare my hand or whatever to continue the service without contaminating my client. That's what we're evaluating. Okay? Any other questions about that? Great. So once we've stopped working and we've done all those steps, oops, hang on a second. I went backwards. We're then going to proceed into the chemical portion of the examination. Everybody says, when can I take the glove off? Well, if you've cut yourself really, you got to leave the glove on, don't you? But if I haven't really cut myself, right after these instructions, I can take the glove back off. But I would leave it on until these instructions are read, okay? Just to make sure everything's kosher. Okay, so we've already seen an initial setup, haven't we? And we've seen a secondary setup. Do we need to see another setup? Absolutely not. So you have 2-minute setups currently in the exam. This is called a 10-minute setup that's performed like a 2-minute setup. So we have our first client come in, do the haircut. Now we have a second client come in. We did a shave and a blood exposure on that client, correct? Now I'm going to transition to the chemicals. But it's the same client as the second client. I don't have to disinfect. I don't have to go through all that drama again. I've done it twice. We don't have to see it again. So all we're really doing is we're going to dump out the supply, get rid of the shaving supplies here, right? We don't need them anymore. We're in the chemical section. So I'm going to get rid of all those shaving supplies. I'm going to put on a chemical drape. So if they already have a plastic or saturation drape on, they can just simply use that same drape because it's the same person. But they have to put on a chemical cape. Chemical draping is necessary here. So what I'm getting rid of is just all the shaving stuff. I'm still keeping my universal supplies out. I don't have to wipe anything down. Just go on with the chemicals, all right? So it says I have to set up for chemical waving, predisposition and strand test, chemical relaxer, and the hair color retouch. That's a lot of stuff on the station, and that's exactly what we're evaluating. Everything has to be out. Don't leave anything in a bag. Okay? No longer do you have a bag for color and a bag for chemical waving and a bag for relaxer. You now have one bag. They dump it all out, sort it out on the table, and use it off the table as they need it. Okay? So if you're working with the cosmetology, this is the same. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask that each service or task is set up as you've taken it out of the supply bag.
Yes. Every single thing is set up, ready to go. Nothing can stay in a bag.
And that setup is on the station.
On the station. And it's all 4 of these procedures.
So you can do the service from the station, or should the candidate transition that service to a manicure table?
No, they can do it right off the station.
And there's no SMA that the items have to be placed on?
Correct.
It can just be on the surface that's been disinfected?
Yes. Same client.
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about disinfection, any of that stuff. We've made it pretty simple here. You know, and we've already seen everything we need to see. So now let's watch them apply chemicals and apply them safely, okay? So I've dumped out all this stuff on the table. I've got my rods and my papers and everything off to this side. And I've got my color over here, my relaxer over here. I've sorted things out, okay? I do not have a bag that says predisposition test on it. If you're going to use a swab, that was dumped out of that bag, wasn't it? It's just sitting there. Nothing is separated. If you separate things into bags, they're going to miss points on every single section. Because part of this evaluation is working on a crowded station. We want them to have a crowded station. And if you notice, every single NIC examination, that second client is crowded. Every one of them. That's why. Okay? So see, I'll give you that little insight.
That goes for the cosmetology and manicurists also? Everything, all the bags out?
Correct. Aesthetics, everything.
Everything, aesthetics, okay.
Everything for a client needs to be out.
Okay.
Nothing in separate bags. Now, gloves and spatulas, those things, yes, those are universal supplies. Those are different, aren't they? But everything we ask you to set up here for the chemical waving, predisposition, chemical relaxer, and the hair color, everything has to be out on the table, ready to go. Okay? All right, they have 10 minutes to do that because they don't have to disinfect and all that drama, but I do have to apply chemical drape, don't I? So it has to be a 2-cloth towel drape. Most common barber drape probably is the wrap around the neck, right up over the head, wrap around the neck, put the draping on, and then drop it back down the back. I see that one a lot in barber exams. But you could also do a clamp-on towel, cloth towel, then the chemical drape, and then a clamp-on over drape, cloth towel over drape. That would be fine too. Any kind of 2-towel, it has to have 2 cloth towels. No single towel drapes. Okay? So the draping has to change, but it only has to change to chemical draping. So in that second client, if you think about it, and I planned ahead for the shave, right? I've already got a non-saturating drape on, plastic drape, whatever you want to call it. I can just transfer that and leave it on the chemical, okay? All right. So chemical supplies are labeled in English, and yeah, they are going to have a supply. They're going to have waving lotion. It is not called saturation fluid. It's called waving lotion, okay? Saturation fluid isn't what it is. Implements and supplies are visibly clean. So we're looking at everything on the chemical waving station, correct? Are the rods clean? Are they free of hair? The papers. Every paper I just sat down on that station just became what? Contaminated, correct? That's important to remember. So I don't want to set a whole box of papers out because I'm going to have to throw the whole box away. Right? I'm going to put a small pile of papers out there to use. All the time I take this whole examination, my main every time I step back or think about it, I'm going to look at the floor and make sure there is no papers, no combs, nothing on the floor. Okay? If my neighbor decides to drop a comb and kick it over in my section, I'm not going to raise my hand and say, he just kicked a comb over here. I'm just going to simply pick the comb up and take care of it, aren't I? Because I'm responsible for my station, aren't I? So that just avoids the confrontation. Leave it alone, right? Good. Because we have them hand stuff back or kick it back over, and pretty soon they're arguing about it, and just take care of it, okay? Okay, so performs a scalp analysis. Then they subsection the hair for chemical waving. That looks a lot different. This came directly out of cosmetology, except for the scalp analysis, okay? And I would start doing that in cos because you teach it anyway. It's not wrong. So subsection hair for chemical waving, that's all about how the hair fits on the rod. Nothing's different. Chemical waving's the same. Is it falling off the ends? Is it too wide for the rod? Is it too narrow for the rod? That's what we're looking at in subsectioning. We don't require a 9 section. It's not about how they subsection the head. It's about how the subsection fits on the rod, if you think about it that way. Then wraps the hair. That's all about the paper, isn't it? I can bookend, I can double wrap, I can do any kind of wrap I want, but I have to use a paper. The paper has to be pulled out beyond the hair ends. We're seeing half the country rolling rods upside down. It's crazy. Seriously, half the country. We're seeing it here. Make sure they're underhand wrapping those rods, right? Because when I let go of that, that band's going to cut into the hair. I'm going to have an issue, aren't I? And I'm not going to get a tight wrap that way either. So make sure they're underhand wrapping the rods, snapping them, and they wrap the center back section from the crown to the nape. That's all they have to do. So, like I said, no 9 section, just section that hair off, expose that panel, and wrap that panel. Okay? What kind of rods do they use? Perm rods. What color? It doesn't matter. The color is appropriate for the hair, correct? That's all. So I have to use a paper. Rod-based placement is all about how I'm placing the rods in the hair, correct? That's where I'm talking about the overhand wraps and so forth. But if you start on base, end on base. If you start off base, end off base. Do a simple wrap. Don't do any complicated on, off, blah, 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 blah. Just wrap them either on or off, okay? Much easier. Then, as you wrap them, what we currently see a lot of is they'll start on base and they're doing really good, and then all of a sudden they either get lazy or tired or nervous that they're going to run out of time, and we get 2 thick rods on the bottom. And they fail the whole wrap because of the last 2 rods. Tell them just to stick with it till they're finished. Don't roll the last 2 off base. Lean that head forward and keep them on base, all right? So each one of them has to look the same. They have to have a nice C shape when you look at them from the outside, so you don't have a loose rod here and there, right? That they're all about the same tension. That's all it's about. So chemical waving hasn't changed. It's exactly what you're doing now. The hair has to be wet, has to use a paper, exactly the same. The same process. Once they're finished, please demonstrate a test curl, or excuse me, please demonstrate, I went ahead too far, please demonstrate saturation. I'm going to saturate every rod I wrapped. So if I choose to start at the forehead, which was wrong to begin with, I have to start saturating at the forehead, don't I? So just wrap what we ask you to wrap. There's no extra credit. Okay? Just wrap that center back section. You're going to saturate each one of the rods. Don't saturate and blot, saturate and blot. Don't do things that are unhuman to do in a perm wave. We see all kinds of wild stuff. I see them put protective cream between each rod. You would never do that, okay? You're going to apply a protective cream or cotton, aren't you? One or the other, not both. Cotton's probably the most common we see. They just have to wrap those rods with a piece of cotton, all right? But minimum, they only have to put it under that bottom rod they wrapped, correct? Or protective cream under that bottom rod they wrapped. They can put protective cream around the face, but make sure the examiner, if they're using protective cream, don't put it on until the examiner gives you the verbals, because they won't see it, okay? So, I got to put gloves on, don't I? And then I have to saturate each rod. I can hold a towel underneath that scalp and saturate away. That's fine, but do not put a towel on the floor. Remember, you can't have anything on the floor. And the one thing about perm papers, and I bring that up here because they're light and they blow off the table. So make sure that they're watching their floor, keeping water off the floor, and make sure there's no perm papers on the floor. Okay? So I saturate. Then I'll be asked to demonstrate a test curl. This is a very uncomfortable position for both of them to be in for some reason. I don't know why. But the candidate will step forward, unwrap the rod, and stare at the examiner. They're expecting the examiner to tell them to rewrap it. But the examiner is never going to say that. A test curl is unwrapping 1.5 turns, holding the hair to relax. I'm not tugging, correct? I just hold it to relax. I wrap it back to the head, snap it, and I step back and I'm finished. Okay? Don't look at the examiner for instruction. They're not going to give it to you. They're just going to move on and tell you to remove a rod. If the rod falls out during the test curl, I have to put it back in, don't I? We see a lot of them just pull the rod right out. That's not a test curl. That's removing a rod. So there's a difference. So saturate, then I'm going to have them do the test curl, snap it, and then the examiner is going to ask me to remove one rod from the head. Doesn't matter which rod it is. Pull the rod out, put the paper in the trash, put the rod in it to be disinfected. Don't set them on the station. Be sure and separate them, okay? So it's really no different. They're going to step back and tell them not to do anything. Don't take the rods down. Just leave the rods in the head. Even if everybody else in the room's taking them down, don't take them down. Wait till the examiner tells you to take them down. Okay? Once the examiner is ready to proceed, you'll remove all remaining rods from the head and create 4 quadrants or sections in the remaining chemical services. You'll be allowed to expect to follow client protection, safety, infection control. So they're going to have 5 minutes here to take those rods down and do quadrants. All right? So they take all those rods out. They never set them on the station. They're separating the papers and throwing it in the trash. Rods in the items to be disinfected. And then they're going to create quadrants or 4 sections on the head. Any questions about that? Even though they step back, they're still being evaluated for their draping, and they're still being evaluated for where the disposal is. In other words, they're still being evaluated for infection control and safety, even though they've stepped back. That's why I say sanitize when they step back. Because if I decide to scratch my head back there and I didn't sanitize, I've cross-contaminated. Okay? Okay, we have a question here.
So the candidates are using the combs that are on the chemical wave setup to do this sectioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would use whatever combs they set up. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my question is, what is the best way that you suggest to remove water from the floor?
With a paper towel. Well, that brings up a good thing because this roll of paper towels could never be disinfected, can it? Unless I saturated it completely in disinfectant. We never evaluate this roll of paper towels. So if this paper towel falls on the floor, don't panic. Pick them up and set them back on the table. Don't unwrap them to your elbow thinking that's going to demonstrate something. We don't evaluate it. I'm just going to tell you flat out. The only time we evaluate this towel is when you tear it off. Once you tear it off, then it becomes a functioning part of the station. We watch how you take care of it, right? But this roll is never, ever evaluated. So if I have water on the floor and I just take a paper towel and wipe it up and put it in the trash, sanitize my hands and go back to work, that's perfect. This just took the place of that 90-gallon bag of towels you used to have to bring. That's all. Okay? Yes, sir.
Being that this is the second client, we first did a neck shave that we had the drape up, then we dropped it down so that we can get to the neck, then we dropped it down more onto the tripod so we can get to the shave. Are we bringing it back up for the chemical wave?
Okay, remember, I had to have one draping for the haircut, then I got rid of it. Now I
Right.
have a clean drape for the shave. But, you're exactly right, I can use this same draping as long as it's chemically, a chemical drape. I can use it on the chemicals, so I can bring it back up to the neck. Just to clarify that whole scenario. Okay, so I'd have some extra draping in the kit as well, right? The predisposition and strand test for simulated product, a lot of these stuff, if you're teaching cause, it's the same, all right? The chemical waving hasn't changed, it's the same as it was in barbering now, all right? But this is a new section for barbering. You'll complete a predisposition test and strand test. You'll demonstrate the predisposition test behind the ear. I'm not an anatomist or a doctor, but I can tell you this is my ear and this is behind my ear. This is not behind my ear. And that's where we see him do it, okay? Behind the ear. So you're going to demonstrate the strand test process on one single subsection of hair. One textbook teaches you can pull up to 1 inch. Don't go over 1 inch. That's not how I would do it. That's probably not how you're teaching it. But one of the textbooks does. What we see him do is pull a full subsection. And we're seeing a lot in cause, a lot in cause. Some of the states that are doing the barbering now, that have transitioned over to this new exam, we're seeing a full subsection. Don't pull the full subsection. They'll get marked off for it. It's just isolating a few strands, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's no required wait time. It's not going to process. It's cholesterol. It takes a long time for cholesterol to process, I promise, a lot longer than the exam. So put it on, get it off. That's what we're saying. Okay? It's a demonstration. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and away we go. Predisposition and strand tests are labeled in English. So I brought in my pre-made color bowl. Okay? Just have one bowl marked color or tint. Either one's fine. Not color or tint, but color or mark one tint, all right? They're both aniline derivatives, correct? That's what we're looking for. I'm going to uncap that bowl. I'm going to find my swab on the table and my stuff. I cannot use an alcohol prep here. I have to have a cleanser. So again, these little hotel bottles come in really handy because I have a shampoo, right? I can use that. I can fill it full of water. It says shampoo on it. You have to bring a bottle of shampoo or cleanser for this section. It's already set out on the station, isn't it? Because I have to cleanse behind the ear, don't I? Then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to wipe it. And then I'm going to take my swab, dip it in my color, dab it behind the ear, and throw it in the trash. That's it. That's the predisposition test. I have to cleanse, I have to dry, and I have to apply the test. Don't put a Band-Aid on it. I called around to all the different chemical companies, and they said, first of all, if you're going to use alcohol, why would you even put the color on? Because you've already pre-sensitized the skin. You've skewed the test already. So you're worthless. The other thing is the adhesive on the bandage can affect the color. So don't put a Band-Aid over it either, or an adhesive bandage. Just leave it. We're done with it. Cleanse, dry, apply, throw it away. Yes, ma'am. Oh. Hold on one second. Go ahead and ask one more time.
Did we change our gloves, or are we leaving on the same pair?
Great question. I can leave on that same pair of gloves all the way through this, unless they get a hole in them. Then I have to reapply, right? So I just get my bag of gloves out, get one pair out, and I can sanitize those just like my hands. All right? We good? Back there.
For the PD test, can the candidate just use water
Yes.
to saturate the cotton to cleanse the area?
Yes. I would highly recommend water.
Okay, cool.
But mark it's cleanser or shampoo. Because that's what you would actually use.
Take your water bottle and saturate?
No, they can't use their water bottle. They would have to use something labeled cleanser or shampoo.
No, that was
Okay.
the same.
Okay.
Okay.
So then we go into the strand test. The strand test is isolating a small strand of hair, applying the color or tint to that hair. Then I'm going to wash it off and dry it, right? So I'm going to isolate my little strands of hair, nothing more than 1 inch, right? Any way you teach them, they can use a foil if they want. They can put it straight over their glove if they want. I can just apply that color right on top of my glove, can't I? All right? I'm going to apply it, I'm going to spray it down with some water and wipe it off with a paper towel. Throw the paper towel away, and I'm done. Okay? Very simple. Then we move on to the relaxer section. We had them do quadrants. So some random place they now have a wet strand of hair, right? Doesn't really matter. We're finished with that section. It doesn't matter that it's wet or not. We have a lot of problem with the relaxer because they say, I can't apply it, the hair's wet. Absolutely correct. You would never apply relaxer to wet hair. But in this situation, they don't have any way to dry it. So they are going to apply that relaxer right onto one of the back quadrants of hair, and they're going to do a full quadrant. So they have 15 minutes. They're going to do one back quadrant, either the left back quadrant or the right back quadrant. Either one's fine. The relaxer supplies are labeled in English. So now I've capped this color off by this point. I've set it off to the side when I finished my strand test because I'm going to use it again. The brush that I used needs to go away because I can't cross-contaminate relaxer with color. You make sure they're taking care of these bowls after they're finished with them. This is the one time, as soon as they're done, have them clean it up. Okay? The implements and supplies are clean. That's what they're going to miss if there's dirty brushes on the table. All right? So make sure everything at this point is clean. Subsections here for hair relaxer application, they're just going to apply that relaxer just like they're supposed to. They're going to subsection it off in a proper width. They're going to do a mid shaft. They're going to come out from the scalp. They're going to do the ends, and they're going to smooth. Or maybe the way most of us do it, they're going to apply a mid shaft back from the scalp, then pull it through with their fingers to smooth it through the ends. Flip it up, they go on to the next one. They're going to do the full subsection. So it's the application and the smoothing all at once. Okay? They can do the whole back quadrant and then go back and smooth if they want to. They can do it that way. But it would have to incorporate the application from the mid shaft into the scalp, out to the ends, and smoothing. What do they have to wear? Gloves, correct? What do they have to apply before they do it? Protective cream. Okay?
I just want to clarify, it's a full relaxer application, mid shaft, zone 1, bring it through the ends.
Correct, and smooth.
Right, the smoothing through the ends. Okay.
Through the ends. That's what we get now is we get this. And that's not correct, is it? First of all, it's cuticle and direction of cuticle, right? And moderate tension. So they should be smoothing like this now one time or two. They can use a flat brush if they wish, right? Back of a comb. They can't use the teeth of a brush or bristles of a brush or comb, but the back, right? Or they can just use their fingers. That's fine too. And the way I do it is the mid, back end, zone 1, whatever you want to call it. And then I pull it through the ends and smooth it all at the same time, flip it up and go to the next. Can I start at the bottom, work up? Yes. Can I start at the top, work down? Yes. Okay, but they're going to do that whole back, one back quadrant.
Is the smoothing apply for every subsections or only one?
Every one.
Every one subsections.
So they can go in and apply and then go back and smooth every one of them. That's okay. However you teach them to do it's fine. But yes, it's a proper application on each subsection all the way through.
Okay, I'm confirming that you can apply to the scalp and the ends and smooth directly afterwards?
Absolutely. That's how most of us do it, really. It's faster.
Okay.
But the textbook teaches it differently. So what I'm saying is either technique is fine as long as it's coming clear through the ends. A lot of what we're seeing now is they're not going clear through the ends. They're only smoothing as far out as their hand is, and then they stop. They have to go clear through the end of the hair. They can apply and then go back and smooth, yes. That's fine. So I said they can do the whole quadrant and then go back and smooth it all.
And you said the protective cream, or did you say it just on the bottom or between?
They have to have the protective cream at least around the subsection, or at least around the quadrant that they're doing.
Okay, so around.
They can go around the whole head if they want, but don't apply that till the timing starts, okay? It's a non-base relaxer, but you still use protective cream, okay? Then I'm going to go back to my color, because that's the color retouch section, right? And color retouch hasn't been redefined. It's just a 1-inch retouch instead of a 2-inch retouch, all right? So they're going to use the other back quadrant. So if they started on the left, now they're going to use the right for the color. So they're just going to use the 2 back quadrants is all they're ever going to use, okay? They have 1 inch of regrowth. This is the same as cause, comes right out of the cause exam because the barbers agreed they do it the same way, okay? So it's not a big deal. Why reinvent the wheel? Color retouch supplies are labeled in English. Implements and supplies are visibly clean. Subsections hair, so they're using the proper subsection widths to apply these subsections. They're also applying the simulated color, so they're applying it out 1 inch, correct? Good saturation. It's not on the scalp, it's to the scalp, right? We don't put color on the skin. So if they get it on the skin, same with the relaxer. If I get it on, get it off. No harm in that, but throw the paper towel away, all right? But I have to keep watching and making sure I'm not getting it on the skin. They don't have to lay a paper towel over the part they're not processing. Don't worry about all that drama. It's just that back quadrant, okay? They're going to apply that simulated hair product. Final result, we're not ever going to walk over and check any of these, okay? We're just watching them apply it. The final result is, did they go 1 inch? Did they go 2 inches? That would be a no, wouldn't it? So don't measure it off. Don't get all technical on us here. It's about 1 inch. Remember this thing? I learned that in school. That's 1 inch, right? But don't measure it off. Just go out about 1 inch. Is the saturation good? Did it come straight from the scalp out? That's what we're looking at, the actual application, okay? I'm still maintaining my chemical drape. One of the big questions is, what if I oversaturate in the chemical waving? Do I have to change the towel? No, it's a new section, isn't it? We look at that towel as dry when we get to the relaxer, even though it's soaking wet, okay? So that's your barber exam. You're actually doing the blow style and the thermal curling. Those are exactly the way you're doing them now. 2-minute setups. It comes at the end rather than incorporates in the interior of it. But they're exactly the same. Then the examination will end. Throw everything in the kit and get out. Okay?
I want to make sure everyone's aware that we did take out the facial service from the barber exam.
Yeah. As of September, you'll stop doing the facial. You'll just do the blow style and the thermal curl. Yes, ma'am.
So this is implemented
As I believe the 20-something. Maybe it's October, I don't know. But I'm just saying, through September, you'll be doing this exam. They'll let you know when it changes. It'll change after we come and talk to you at the test sites. That's when it will change.
The new exam's effective in October.
October, okay. Sorry, I was a month off. Can you use a clip on the towel? Yes. Remember we talked about that. You can secure it with a clip, but the same clip can't be used on every client. It has to be a new clip each time.
California is still including the thermal, is that correct or no?
Yes, you'll be doing a blow style and a thermal curl. Okay. And it's the same as you're doing now. No different. It just comes at the end. Okay? So if you think about it, because you've already got stuff in the hair, don't you? Well, we thought about that. And if they apply the color and the relaxer in the back, they can still use the same mannequin head to dry one front quadrant, and they can still use one to do 2 on the side and 2 on top. So we've already thought about that. So as long as they use the mannequins correctly, they can still perform the other 2 sections on the same mannequin. Okay? Because you've got 4 quadrants, right? We only use 2 of them. Okay. 2 on top, 2 on one side. Yeah.
You meant the curls?
2 on top, 2 on one side for the curl. You're not doing 7 anymore.
Okay. The new test.
The new test is 4 curls.
4 curls. 2 on, what was it? 2 on the
It's
side?
in the CIB.
Okay.
I don't have it with me, but just read it. It's simple. If you're a cause instructor, you already kind of know how that goes. So they can be on base, off base, vertical, horizontal. Slice them, dice them, make julienne fries. It's fine. All right.
Going back to the relaxer, For the Cosmos, it's only one section, right?
Correct.
Okay.
What was awesome was the barber said, we asked him about that. We said, can we just do what the Cosmos do, just one subsection? And every barber said, absolutely not. We don't do it like they do. If we do it, it's once in a while. So you better see what we do a little bit differently. And I agreed with that, you know, just because barbers don't do it as much as the Cosmo does it. And that was their whole perception. That's why it was different. And it is the most dangerous thing we do. It really is. In a virgin application, the most things can go wrong. So I think the evaluation is really good in either exam, in either situation. And that was their justification as barbers behind that is, no, cosmetologists would do that more than we do. So let's make sure we know it. And I had to agree with it. I tried to argue with them, but I had to agree with it. They're the barbers. Yeah.
Because we have barbers, Cosmos.
Yeah, barbers and Cosmos, yeah, and they do it differently. And so, yeah, it is a little confusing for the instructors, but just understand the Cos just do one subsection, the barbers do a full back panel. Yeah. Quadrant, sorry, not panel, quadrant. Yes.
So you don't resection for, because I've been teaching where they do the L shape to do the curls, so it's not just, literally just do two in that front quadrant? Oh. Okay.
4.
Huh?
They'll do 4.
In
They'll have
that-
a front quadrant, so they'll start at the top and just do 4 curls all the way down. And just, they can do them vertical, horizontal. They just have to place 4 curls in that quadrant. It's the use of a curling iron, right? It's not about the curl. NIC has not required a barrel curl for 100 years. Well, not 100 years, but I'm just saying. It's been a long time. So don't worry about clipping them up. A ringlet is a curl, isn't it? So it's just 1.5 turns on an iron. You're using a hot iron. Don't spit test it. Don't tap it to see if it's hot. You know, put a comb behind it. The same stuff you're doing now. All right? But you're just going to do 4 curls in the front quadrant. 4 curls in the front quadrant. It's in the CIB under thermal curling. Yeah. Okay, the base to ends question. I knew that was going to come up. Let's talk about base to ends. In the instructions, it says you have to curl from base to ends, doesn't it? What it's really saying, and there's no other way to put it, is we want the hair on the iron from the ends clear down to the scalp. Has nothing to do with basing the hair. And that's a very confusing point, and I understand that. But what we're wanting to do is contain the entire hair piece, the subsection, wound down on the iron from the ends, so they're not fish hooking, clear down to the scalp so they insert a comb behind it. That's what it's about. So I hope that clarifies that question. I'm glad you brought that up. That's true for cause as well. Okay, there's no basing of the curl. We're talking about rolling from the ends to the scalp and inserting the comb between the scalp and the iron. So thank you for asking that. That is $1 million question. Yeah, it really is. It's confusing. Okay, well, I want to thank you for your participation today. It's been great having you and great having people in the room. Usually we're here by ourselves and nobody interacts with us. So thank you very much. We'll be going on to electrology, so those of you who are staying for electrology are welcome to stay. Otherwise, we're going to take about 2 minutes and let you transition to the hallway so we can get started on that. Thank you. Okay, we're back. And with the electrology, sorry for the pause there. We just wanted to clear the room so we didn't have any interruptions. But the electrology exam is new, updated, and I just want to kind of go over some of the changes with you and let you know. We did stick with the setups are setups. So if you heard the barber setup or a cosmetology setup or nail setup, they're all the same. We're only setting up for some different things. So you'll set up the universal supplies and equipment you'll use throughout the examination. You'll also set up supplies for the thermolysis section of the examination. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You'll have 15 minutes to complete this section. You'll be informed when you have 8 minutes remaining. Do not demonstrate any procedures until the verbal instructions are given, and you're instructed to begin. And in this exam, we have you raise your hand to indicate you finished. So you won't be stepping back, you'll be raising your hand. Excuse me, that jumped forward. Let me go back. So you'll be disinfecting your work area completely. It doesn't want to stay there for some reason. You'll be disinfecting your work area completely. You'll be sanitizing your hands Then you'll be setting up your universal supplies labeled in English, your equipment. You do need to disinfect your equipment. You need to disinfect your work surface, the tubing, any of the equipment that has been exposed. You'll need to disinfect wires and so forth. You'll also be sanitizing your hands. Before you set up any supplies, you'll need your astringent, you'll need your thermal supplies set up, and then you're going to go ahead and go on with the thermolysis section. In the thermolysis section, it's 2 segments. You have a 10-minute and a 5-minute segment. You'll perform thermolysis. You'll demonstrate on the upper lip. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You'll continue working for the entire 10 minutes. So we have them on a facial table in California. So you will need to disinfect that facial table, even though you might be using a sheet or a barrier. They do need to wipe that down with disinfectant as well as the work surface. But you're going to set up for your thermolysis. We're going to do that on the upper lip of the live model. It will be applying actual current. We do evaluate the adjustment of the machine and so forth, so it's not a simulated action. Thermolysis supplies are labeled in English. Implements and supplies are visibly clean. You're going to prepare your model for service, so you're going to get their draping in order, and you're going to use their antiseptic. You'll demonstrate hair removal on the upper lip using thermolysis, demonstrate safe use of implements and equipment. So what we are looking at is how the tubing's held, if it's wrapping around the neck, if it's touching the client in any way, contaminating him. We're also looking at the insertions, the actual applying the current, is there blanching and so forth. Really the process itself is basically the same as it always has been. It just looks a little bit different in the way that they're evaluated in the task lines, but they're definitely the same type of assessment. Once they've applied that current, they will apply it for the full 10 minutes. They'll be told to stop working, do nothing until the next verbal instructions are given, and then the examiner will examine the assessment of the skin after treatment, making sure that the blanching didn't occur, that there's no bleeding or anything like that. Once the examiner's indicated they've completed their assessment, we'll now proceed, and they're going to conclude the thermolysis treatment and dispose of supplies used in the previous section of the examination. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You'll have 5 minutes to complete this section. You'll be informed when you have 2 minutes remaining. Raise your hand to indicate you've finished. So once you've finished, the examiner has said we will now proceed. They'll read you these instructions, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to dispose of all those thermolysis supplies. You will need to change the probe. There will be sharps containers provided that you can use on site. Do not bring your own sharps containers. But you will change the probe, and you'll be discarding, only discarding, not disinfecting, not cleaning up any type of, or setting up for any type of the next section. You're just cleaning up the thermolysis supplies. We do evaluate which container you put those in. Again, like I told the barbers, I would be very sure that I bring 3 separate containers that go on the floor. Your soiled linens, your trash, and your to be disinfected. They just work much better on the floor because all we evaluate is what you're dropping that into, what the next process is for that part of equipment. Once they stop working, we do ask the model to stand up and step aside, and we're going to prepare for our second client. When we prepare for our new client, we'll set up for the universal supplies and equipment for the remainder of the examination. We're going to set up the blend method, galvanic, and cataphoresis. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control. You'll have 15 minutes to complete the section. Be informed when you have 8 minutes remaining. Do not demonstrate until we ask you to. Raise your hand when you're finished. So this is the section that we're going to actually look at 3 different, the blend, the galvanic, and the cataphoresis. Again, those are the same 3 task lines, or same 4 task lines, excuse me, where you're going to be disinfecting the workstation. You're going to be sanitizing your hands and setting up those supplies labeled in English and putting things in the right containers. Once you get into your blending section, you'll have 10 minutes. Let me drop back here. You'll be disinfecting, you'll be sanitizing your hands and going forward. The blend method is 10 minutes. You'll perform the blend method. You'll demonstrate it on the leg. That's either the right or the left leg. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control. You'll have 10 minutes. Be told when you have 5 minutes remaining. Your blending supplies are labeled in English. Your implements and supplies are visibly clean. you'll prepare the model for the service. So anytime we're preparing, we're actually applying the antiseptic and draping. We're going to demonstrate hair removal of the leg using the blend method. Demonstrate safe use of implements and equipment, so we're actually evaluating exactly the same things we did before. In the previous examination, we're looking for blanching, bleeding, insertion, improper insertion, bent needles or probes, those types of things, dimpling of the skin, meaning the probe are too large, and so forth. The examiners will evaluate them as they are doing the service as well as when they're finished. Please stop working, do nothing until the next verbal instructions are given. So they're going to work the entire 10 minutes. They need to adjust their machines. Don't just tug the hairs out. Same as thermolysis, make sure your machines are adjusted properly and you're actually able to pull the hair out, slide the hair out easily, not tug it out. Once we're finished, we are going to evaluate the skin. I apologize for this slide presentation. I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. We'll come over here this way. We will walk over, we will evaluate the skin, and then we will proceed. The galvanic method, you're going to demonstrate on the arm. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, infection control procedures. You'll continue working for the entire 10 minutes again. Do not conclude the treatment until you're instructed to do so. Your galvanic supplies are labeled in English. Implements and supplies are visibly clean. You're going to prepare the model for the service. This does not say anything about having to change the probe or disinfect. This is on the same client. If you choose to use the same probe, you're welcome to. If you're dropping from an insulated to a different type of probe, make sure that you're putting it into the sharps container. You're going to go ahead and prepare that model for service, which means draping, and then demonstrate hair removal on the arm using that straight galvanic current. So we've now demonstrated our thermolysis, the heat treatments, we've demonstrated the blend method, and now we're doing the galvanic method. We're going to demonstrate safe use of the implements or equipment. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, we'll ask you to please stop working. So each one of these sections that we're doing are 10-minute sections. You'll demonstrate through the full 10 minutes. We tell you when to stop working, we tell you when to start working, and then we evaluate the work that you did. So we'll assess that model skin after treatment. And all the time we're making sure that you're putting any draping that drops on the floor, any implements or tools that drop on the floor, we're putting them in the right containers. So any linens that drop, we'd be putting in our soil linens. Any of the tools or implements that we drop, we of course would be either disinfecting. If I drop my needle holder, I could wipe that off with disinfectant in the tubing and reinsert a new probe and continue working. But if I drop a probe on the floor, of course I'd need to throw that into my sharps container, sanitize my hands and get a clean probe, that sort of thing. Just basic infection control and safety being used. We do evaluate the insertions. As far as a bent needle insertion, because we talk about bending the needles, if you're using a bent needle method, that's fine, but we're talking about bending the needle during the insertion. In other words, you're puckering the skin and the needle bends. But if you do want to bend the needle, I use that method, the bent needle method. That's fine as long as you're using it as a method. Once we're ready to proceed, we go to the cataphoresis section of the examination. You'll perform cataphoresis. Again, this is on the same client. You'll be expected to, you'll demonstrate cataphoresis on the area previously treated in the galvanic method section, which was the arm. You'll be expected to follow client protection, safety, and infection control procedures. You'll have 5 minutes to complete this section. You'll be informed we have 2 minutes remaining. Raise your hand to indicate you've finished. So we're only going to be doing cataphoresis on the arm. You have 5 minutes. Cataphoresis supplies are labeled in English. Implements and supplies are visibly clean. You're going to go ahead and demonstrate that cataphoresis. Of course, there's all different types of rollers. A disinfectable roller could be could be applied to the skin, I know in many cases, but we do require that a cotton or some type of a barrier be inserted between the roller and the skin as it's being used. So if you're using some type of an antiseptic and on cotton, that would be fine. On a tissue, that's fine, but you do have to provide a barrier between the skin and the roller. Once that's finished, you'll be discarding those that chemically treated tissue or cotton, whatever you used, into the trash. and you're going to be putting things just back on the table at this point. Anything that's not chemically saturated. The next section is the blood exposure section. In our blood exposure during a service, your client sustained a minor cut to the back of the hand. The injury is such you can continue with the service. You've not come in contact with the blood and your work area has not been contaminated. You're expected to demonstrate a proper procedure for blood exposure. So this is a new section to this examination. We've talked about the back of the hand. Maybe I've done an improper insertion and I have blood coming out. I've hit a capillary, those types of things perhaps. But anyway, there's blood present and I need to take care of it. There's never any setup in any examination for a first aid kit. We expect you to put it out in the beginning with your universal supplies. You can make your own first aid kit. I've made this one. Your first aid kit will contain a secondary bag. I would put several in there in case they do puncture the skin. They will need to actually do a blood exposure in any section of the examination that they would wound someone. So they do need a secondary bag, they do need an alcohol prep, and they do need a bandage. Those are the three things that we do need for this section. So I'm going to have several of them inside these first aid kits. If you have a prepared first aid kit, that's fine, or you can make your own like I have. But the main thing is that I take things out, as I use all these supplies, I'm putting everything straight into the bags. So my client has the back of their hand injured. I haven't affected any of my workstation at all. Nothing is contaminated except that area. So I need to sanitize my hands, get into my first aid kit. I get my secondary bag out. I prop that bag open so that I'm able to use it on the station. Let me walk over here. So that I'm able to use it and drop things straight into it. I'm going to tear open my alcohol prep or use some hand sanitizer and a paper towel. I'm going to clean off the back of that hand. It's my client's hand, not my hand, but my client's hand. I am going to put everything that when I tear this open, it's going to go in here. As I use my prep, it's going to go in that bag as well. I'm then going to tear open my bandage. That paper will go inside of here. I'm going to apply my bandage. The tabs will go inside of here. Everything that I'm now contaminating will go inside this bag. I have to apply gloves. I can't touch my clients without gloves on. Now, I had gloves on when I started the service. I have to wear gloves during the services, so I can still continue to wear that same pair of gloves, but once I'm finished with them, I have to take them off and put them in this bag as well. I don't use any biohazard stickers. This is simply a first aid kit. It's not a blood exposure kit. It's not a blood spill kit. It is simply a first aid kit. When I'm finished with these contaminated supplies, I zip this bag shut and I drop it into my trash bag. So I've now secured the cut on my client's back of their hand. I've got a bandage on it. I've cleaned it. And now everything's into a bag, all contaminated supplies into the trash. Remember, no biohazard labels, no blood exposure kits, and no blood spill kits. It's all first aid kits. So again, I remove those supplies from the kit. I have to sanitize my hands before I remove those materials. My materials are visibly clean. I have to wear gloves. I don't need to sanitize my hands and stick them in gloves. I can put gloves on and sanitize the gloves. Please don't try to sanitize your hands and put gloves on. I could have already put my gloves on, and the way I'd probably do it is apply my gloves, sanitize them, get my supplies out, and then start working on my client's hand would be the best way to do it. It says does not follow infection control procedures. So I'm cross-contaminating my station. I'm laying things back on the station and so forth. Once the timer's gone off or everyone's raised their hand, we now excuse the model and the examination has concluded. So it's changed a little bit in the mechanics. We did add the blood exposure. I think it flows very nicely. The cataphoresis was evaluated in several different ways, but we decided that it was best just to do it on the galvanic area. It was very popular on the survey and also with the subject matter experts that we do watch the galvanic section. I know I get a lot of questions, why are we still doing galvanic? That was actually came back on the survey as being important from the practitioners, and it also was very important to the ones in the room when we were developing the examination. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and email those. We'll try to answer them through email. But I do appreciate your participation, and we'll see you in September.